Okay, calling to order the Joint Committee on Ways and Means and Government Operations. This afternoon, we'll hear from Department of Accounting and General Services, who will present their biennium budget requests. Good afternoon.
Hello, Chair, Chair Dela Cruz, Chair McKelvey, Vice Chair Keith Agaran, and Vice Chair Gabbard, members of the Committee on Ways and Means and the Committee on Government Operations. Aloha and Happy New Year.
Aloha.
Mahalo for this opportunity to be before you this afternoon. My name is Keith Regan, and I am the Acting Comptroller and Director of the Department of Accounting and General Services. We're here this afternoon to review the testimony that we submitted on our biennium budget, provide insight into our priorities, and to answer any questions that the committees may have regarding our budget and our operations. Chair, if I may ask your permission, I'd like to briefly introduce the team from DAGS that are joining us here this afternoon. Is that okay?
Yep.
I'd like to first start with our Acting Deputy Comptroller, Myo-Ling Silliman, to my left here. Myo-Ling, I'm just truly fortunate to have her on our team in this role, as she has served the Department of Accounting and General Services as in the Administrative Services Office for many years, and has gained a tremendous amount of experience working for also other departments such as DCCA and BNF. In order of program IDs, I just wanted to go through those who are here with us today. We have representing our accounting division, our accounting administrator, Lenora Fisher. They could just please stand and wave. Representing our audit division, audit administrator, Ronald Shiigi. Representing the Office of Information Practices, Director Cheryl Kakazu Park. Representing the Archives Division, Archives Administrator, Dr. Adam Jansen. Representing the Office of Enterprise Technology Services, Chief Information Officer, Doug Murdoch. Representing Risk Management Officer, Tracy Kitaoka. Representing the Land Survey Division, Administrator Reed Surratt. Representing our Public Works Division, Administrator Chris Kinimaka. Representing our Central Services Division, Acting Administrator Richard Louie. Representing our State Procurement Office, Purchasing Chief Don Suruda Kashiwabara. Acting State Procurement Administrator Bonnie Kahakui sends her regrets she was not able to be here this afternoon. Representing our Automotive Management Division is not going to be present today, but that would be headed up by Administrator Michael Arakaki. Representing our Hawaii District Office is also not able to be here due to illness is Mary Joy Angsiako. Representing our Kauai District Office, we have Administrator Engineering Program Manager Eric Agena. Representing our Maui District Office, Administrator and Engineering Program Manager Jeff Pearson. Representing the Campaign Spending Commission, Executive Director Kristen Izumi Nitao. Representing the Office of Elections, Chief Elections Officer Scott Nago. Representing the State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, Interim Executive Director Karen Ewald. Representing the King Kamehameha Celebration Commission, Executive Director Amy Hammond. Representing the Enhanced 911 Board, Chair Thalia Burns, and unfortunately, Executive Director Courtney Tagupo is not able to be here this afternoon. My apologies. Representing the State Building Code Council, I don't think he's able to be here, but Chair Howard Wigg, they had a meeting this morning, so I'm not sure that he's able to be present. Joining us from the Comptroller's Office, our Planning and Policy Analyst, Tony Benabisi. From our Administrative Services Office, Acting Administrative Services Officer, Cassandra, otherwise known as Cassie Toyofuku, and Management Analyst 5, Miyoki Ing, and Management Analyst Andrew Choi. Joining us from our Personnel Office, our Departmental Human Resources Officer, Daylene Liu, and from our Systems and Procedures Office, Derek Soritani. Chair and members, the past few years have presented many challenges that we have had to rely on each other to overcome. Thanks to the guidance and support from our legislature, we were able to navigate our way through the pandemic. We're grateful to the legislature for working with us in a true partnership between branches of government. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize the great work of the prior comptroller, Kurt Otaguro, and his deputy, Audrey Hidano. These two individuals selflessly and tirelessly dedicated themselves to public service and helped to lead the department through some of the most difficult and challenging times. We'd just like to mahalo both Kurt and Audrey. As reflected in the introduction of our team, the Department of Accounting and General Services, otherwise known as DAGS, provides a broad range of services to both internal and external customers. The department's mission is to attain maximum value for the state taxpayers in providing physical, financial, and technical infrastructure support for state departments and agencies so they may accomplish their missions. This is done through the more than 800 positions that make up our 8 divisions, 6 offices, and 11 attached agencies, and reach virtually every corner of the state. Demand for our services, for the services that we provide, continues to grow as facilities are added, existing facilities age, and the need for repair and maintenance increases. The grounds we manage and provide groundskeeping services for, like our facilities, also require and are requiring a higher level of attention to keep them safe and presentable. Whether it be the number of accounting transactions we process, to the vehicles we maintain, to the electrical, plumbing, carpentry, and other trade support we provide, the work is becoming more complex and greater in volume. Thanks to the support of the legislature through additional positions and resources over the years, you've provided much help over those years, and we are truly grateful. What we've presented in our written testimony and the included tables is a reflection of the ever-growing demands being placed on the department and our commitment to do our best to meet those demands. Our priorities for this legislative session are weaved through the budget request that is before you and incorporated in our written testimony. Where we will be focusing our effort will be on addressing our ever-increasing vacancies, addressing the growing list of deferred maintenance, supporting our neighbor island needs, and providing the resources our team needs to successfully support the public, state departments, and the agencies that rely on us. We also must be cognizant of the ever-increasing cost of doing business and search for ways to lower those costs, be more efficient, and find creative solutions that will help us work through even the most challenging and complex issues that face us. We also must not forget that as the central support agency, our neighbor islands and more rural communities here on Oahu need the same level of support as that received by those here in Honolulu. There's no doubt that it is more costly to live and work on the neighbor islands, but regardless, DAGS must remain just as committed in the delivery of our services and support there as we are here. Chair Dela Cruz, Chair McKelvey, Vice Chair Keith Agron, Vice Chair Gabbard, members, I will take you now through the budget request that was submitted and has been referred to as the steady state budget or Governor Ige budget in a minute. But before that, if you take a moment, I'd ask you to turn to table 4 on page 17. This is page 17 of 66, and it's entitled Budget Decisions. There you'll see that we put forward a request that attempts to address our priorities and needs. There were 52 requests totaling approximately $49.8 million in fiscal year 24 and $47.5 million in fiscal year 25 that were presented for consideration by our team. And of those 52 requests, 18 were either partially or completely not included in fiscal year 24, which equated to approximately $6.8 million. Of the 18 I mentioned, 2 were actually reductions from our original requests, totaling about $2.8 million. Those items are the AGS 240 State Procurement Office requests found on line 13, which was reduced by about $21,000, and the AGS 879 request for Office of Elections, which is found on line 30, which was reduced by $2.7 million. I'd also like to highlight a $1.5 million hardware refresh that you'll see in the budget as part of the governor's decision that we believe was meant to offset some of the hardware requests that they did not include from ETS. And if you add back the $163,000 from transferring returning IT costs to DOTAX and DHERD, and add back the costs for the other requests that we have, you'll see that when you reconcile it, that it comes out to the $49.8 million and $44.7 million that makes up the governor's decision for fiscal year 24 and 25, respectively. Also on table 4 for fiscal year 25, again, of the 52 requests, 20 were either partially or completely not included, which totaled about $7.4 million. Of the 20 I mentioned, 3 were reductions from our original request, totaling $1.3 million. There was also 1 position in the State Procurement Office on line 13 that we had requested be permanent, but was changed to temporary in the final governor's decision. Adding back in the adjustment by BNF to the IT recurring costs of $163, reconciles to the bottom line change between our request and what was included in the governor's decision to 7.3 million. You'll see from our request that we did get support for full year funding for positions, resources to support the growing needs on our neighbor islands, and funds that will help us support our core mission and programs. We have had the opportunity to meet with BNF regarding the requests that were not included or partially included in the governor's decision, to advocate for these items to be included in the governor's message coming, which will be forthcoming. We did resubmit those requests to BNF last week, and we're hopeful that they'll be considered and included. Chair, if it's acceptable, I'd like to go through the budget requests in a little bit more detail, which you can find in Table 6, entitled Proposed Budget Additions, that can be found on page 20 of 25. I'm sorry, on page 20. And this table provides more detail and context to the request that we submitted and included in the governor's.
Okay, members, that's page 35 on our document.
Actually, before you do that, can you go to
Yes.
table 15? For FY 25, it might be just a function of the form, but for the lump sum maintenance budget, you know, I don't have a number there. I just have, I mean, you got 15 million the first year.
Right.
Then I just got cross hatches the whole way. So how much is that supposed to be, FY 25?
Yeah, so our original request, is that what you're asking for?
No, I want to.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 15.
Table
It's 15 million on my table.
Okay, so it's 15.
Yes, yes, Vice
All
Chair.
right.
Stacey, what was that from? Is that a technical glitch or is that how they submitted it? Table 15.
73.
Okay, why don't you go back to table 6 then? Go ahead.
So how much is it?
Thank you, Chair. So the first request is for full year funding for 2 HR positions. In fiscal year 24, we're asking for $51,990. In fiscal year 25, we're asking for $54,156. And this is to help support some of the work going on in our personnel office.
That's AGS 901.
Yes, I'm sorry, AGS 901, line 1. Line 2 is for AGS 223, and that is for full year funding for 4 positions that we're requesting. And this will provide full year funding support for this program. Chair, and then also on line 3, we have for AGS 231, we're asking for full year funding for 7 custodial positions, which primarily is here for Oahu. We're asking for, I believe it's 6 janitor 2 positions and 1 janitor 3 position for our increased needs to provide janitorial services here.
Is that fixed or is that roaming?
This would be to backfill some of the areas where we're finding that there's shortage, where we're not covering it enough. So, you know, ultimately it's to assign them to facilities.
So how could we find out how you're reorganizing? Was supposed to be restructured because, you know, some of the custodial staff were assigned to buildings and it really was not, and they had staff that were assigned to buildings rather than to keeping all the buildings.
Yeah, there was a
yeah.
discussion at one point of pooling extra people
Mhm.
or several positions.
Is there
so
a
that they could
plan?
remotely could change building to building when needed.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not
but-
opposed to something like that. I think it's actually a pretty good idea to have that flexibility. So I'll go back and
Yeah, because there's
have that
supposed to be a
discussion with
plan and
CSD.
staff.
Yeah,
And
so-
because we're adding more positions rather than better use of positions for
I-
the state-owned buildings.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, Senator.
All right, so for the full year of funding you're requesting for all these positions. I
Yes.
noticed that DAGS took a lot of the restrictions despite the $2 billion surplus in delay in hiring and vacancy savings. So if we give you this money, are you gonna actually fill these?
That is our intent, Vice Chair. We have actually been having those discussions internally Because ultimately, we're having to pay for overtime to get the job done, right? The work doesn't stop. And so in order to get that work done, we're having to ask our employees to sacrifice their personal time. They don't have to, but we're asking them if they would be willing to do that. And so the intent here is to really push forward. And I'll talk more about that in my testimony about some of the activities that we're actually moving forward with, like WikiWiki Hire as an example, for some of our positions that are hard to fill.
But what about the janitor positions you have now that are vacant? Because I see at least 1 janitor 2 and 3 janitor 3 is vacant.
Yeah, those are all in different phases of recruitment. We can certainly bring up our personnel officer to talk more about sort of where they are in the process. But those positions all of our positions are very important for us to get recruited and filled. Established, if they're not established yet, having those position descriptions updated and then recruiting and fulfilling those positions as quickly as possible.
Okay, so you have on here that you're gonna fill by March 1st. The janitor 2 was supposed to be filled yesterday. Is it filled?
Yeah, I'll have to take a look and see if we got the detail on that. We'll get that for you.
Okay, because if you can fill those by the dates that you have on here, then we can consider the additional positions, but if these are not filled, it might be difficult to add.
I understand that, Senator.
So that would be last year's budget then? Because you're saying they're billing it now, if that's last year.
Yeah, he just wants to add, but he wants to add
Yeah.
7.
Yeah.
And
Well,
previ-
these are full year funding requests. So I believe these are already in there, but they're partially funded. Is that accurate?
The vacancies you can fill now,
Yeah.
though. It says you already
Yeah.
got approval.
That is correct. The 7 positions that were given back to us, those were positions that were deleted. So as they were added back last session, they were given back to us at half year funding. And because these positions existed, so we should be able to move through them quickly because the PDs are already in place.
No, but again, my question earlier to the controller was DAGs chose to take the restrictions based on vacancy savings, so we might have funded it for only 6 months, but then you guys didn't take the money. You guys decided to use the money to address the restrictions that the governor made. So if we're gonna give you full funding now, are you gonna, if this governor decides to do restrictions, are you gonna look at not filling these positions and go ahead and continue paying overtime?
Let me,
Yeah, because we don't budget for restrictions.
So yes, you're going to go ahead and
no,
use these positions to deal with your restrictions?
that is,
That's not a strategy.
let me just assure you of this.
Looks like a strategy from looking at how you fill your restrictions. I
So,
mean, if you look at the report you gave us, I mean, every single division is taking vacancy savings and
Right, the way we deal with restrictions, so we do it across the board. Everybody gets the 10% restriction if that's.
all
what
right, so and your
requires.
division has decided they'd prefer not to have the bodies, they'd rather just give up the money.
Well, we do have the ability to go back to the governor and ask for restriction release if we can handle them.
But
However-
did DAGs do that?
Yes, we do.
No, did DAGs do it? I mean, you've got a $2 billion surplus. I mean, every single department has come in and there was restrictions on every single department. I mean,
That is
do we
correct.
have a $2 billion surplus, or is that created by the fact that he restricted the entire state government?
Right, so when you have the restriction, you need to deal with that somehow.
No,
right?
but he asked, did you actually appeal?
With some of our programs, we did. So
In regards to the janitors?
not with the janitor, so we also have the ability to work from within the department. So if you have a program that can handle that and has surplus, then we can shift the restriction across programs without having to come in. So when you go into the governor, the first question that's.
No, but all I'm trying to do is find out if you're filling fine,
Mhm.
and if you're asking for more positions, are you still saying that you're gonna use, each division is gonna decide whether or not they really need those positions if there's another restriction? I mean, that's not what we're looking for. I mean, you're either gonna do the work or you're not gonna do the work. I mean, if you don't need these positions, then why are you asking for them?
Vice Chair, if I can just assure you that, these positions, from my understanding, were already approved by the legislature and they were funded at half funding.
Right?
And
some of
so
them
the
looks like
request-
You guys gave up that half-year
Well,
funding.
I don't know the history on that. But what I can tell you is my intent going forward is to get these positions filled. I have been in the departments. I know what it's like when you have challenges, to get service provided to you by DAGs. My intent, if I'm given the opportunity, not regardless of whether I'm confirmed or not, between that time and that point in time, I am pushing forward on getting these vacancies filled. That is my goal. That is my commitment. We need to be able to provide these services to the different departments that rely on us, the buildings that rely on this building here that relies on these services. So that is my commitment, Vice Chair.
And if I may add to the half-year funding, we did not go in requesting for half-year funding. It's as per the instructions that were given out in the budget prep instructions. That if it is a new position, is to be requested at half-year funding.
Okay.
If I can, thank you, Chair. So item number 4, again, this is a full year funding request for 3 repair and alteration positions within CSD. That's for AGS 233. For AGS 232, again, also asking for full year funding for 6 grounds positions within CSD to help us address, again, the growing needs for our Oahu program. This includes our facilities and our cemeteries where we're providing those services. AGS, this is line number 6, AGS 807. This is for the Hawaii District Office. We're asking for full year funding for a plumber position. Right now, I think we've got, one plumber right now that's helping to provide services there. And so we need to provide some additional help and support for Hawaii District. They're going back. Yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge for us. And so in order, as you know, Senator, to go from Hilo to Kona, I mean, it takes 2 hours sometimes, right, to go in between. And, by the time you get there and you do your work and you try to drive back, I mean, it's hard. And then if somebody's out sick or whatever, or they're going to take a vacation, who's covering for that? And so we're having to rely on, contracting out some of the work. And, we shouldn't have to do that if we can find the right people with those skills. We want to get, people in there working for us with those skills in those trades. So thank you for that, Senator. We are asking for full year funding for an OA3 position. This is, I believe, within our survey division to help, address some of the clerical work that's being done within that particular operation. We're asking for full year funding for 4 positions. These positions are part of State Procurement Office. So again, to help Bonnie and her team to work through some of those challenges that they're having there. We are asking for funds to be added and positions to support some of the activity that's going on within Archives Division, 2 positions, and then some additional funding to support that activity. And that was AGS 111, line 9.
Can I go back to 807?
Sure.
I understand you also did say that you lack engineers for Hawaii County. So that's a separate ask.
The engineering positions have been very difficult to fill.
I understand.
And a lot of that has to do with, salaries, benefits, and people willing to come and join our team. And I think we're, like everybody else, experiencing the same thing.
But I thought the department was looking at more project management positions versus engineering positions.
For us, we want to fill the engineering positions that have been granted to us by the legislature. We're not asking for any new positions here for engineering. I don't think, not that I'm aware of. We're asking for funding to support
Yeah, but
full
because
year
of the
funding.
difficulty to fill for engineering,
Yeah.
I thought there was going to be some transition, not all, for project management. Is that right?
That was the discussion last year.
Right? We couldn't, because we can't find, especially on Neighbor Island, it's hard to find engineers. We could do. I-
It is difficult. I mean, even Maui, has had its challenges, at the county level. So, and even at the state level, we're having a
So
problem
that's
filling
kind of
that.
the point, is why do we keep approaching it the same
Yeah.
way, knowing we're not going to get a good result?
Yeah, and I apologize, Chair. I mean, I wasn't here during that conversation about project managers, but let me tell you that I am open to exploring that. If that is one way that we can
Because I
get
thought
these
they were coming
positions
up with,
explored, filled.
minimum requirements, job description, Sharon, right?
Yeah, so that was what we were discussing, right?
I think that was the problem with DHERD.
Mm.
And I think we talked about it in several other departments as well, like DOT. And what we were saying is that when DHERD has the applications out or your agencies ask, and when it's the RFP goes out or the notices, there are applications, there are applicants, I understand. But by the time DHERD goes through the process, takes half a year for you guys and all the other agencies, the private sector is picking them up.
Yeah.
And so what we hope that we can accomplish is have DHERD, soon as a list goes that they receive, that they communicate with you guys, and then you folks can make the decision whether you want to either look at the position, look at the pay scale, make some adjustments, and then take it over after that, because DHERD takes too long.
But I thought the engineers now actually do a lot of contract management. Not all of them are actually doing engineering. So you don't need the licensed engineer when you're just managing contracts. So that's where I thought the
Yeah.
discussion was going into
Yeah.
project management, and where they're overseeing engineering contracts, but they're not the licensed, they don't need a licensed engineer to oversee engineering contracts.
Because you had both architects and engineers on board and you were also contracting out. So this is where we asked for clarification and a plan of how you would do project management, where you don't need a license and you
I
can
know.
really get the projects moving. So I don't know if there's a plan on that
Yeah,
and
so if
how you're
it's an
doing it.
engineer that actually does engineering,
Yeah.
that makes sense to
Yeah.
have.
Right.
I
Yeah.
agree.
But if it's an engineer that's really just doing contract management, then I thought the whole thing was to go into project management in those specific positions.
So that was the problem, that there was both contracts out for work, architectural and engineering, and you had engineers on board. And so we really wanted a plan on how you're going to be able to have project management for the contracts and not have to have the engineering license for that person.
I don't know, you have to look at some of the
Yeah, but
codes
it
though and the
depends.
laws
Yeah,
that
but-
govern that.
Yeah.
But it depends, but DAGS was moving forward with project management.
Mhm.
Well, maybe, let me ask the question this way. I mean, the last administration apparently, was looking at moving in the direction that's being discussed right now. Was that part of the transition, briefing that you may have received when you got the position? So you weren't aware that, that's one of the things that was discussed?
No, I apologize, Vice Chair. With the transition and everything else going
Do you
on.
value in what the approach
I do.
though that's being discussed today?
No, I do, Vice Chair. Especially, having come from where I have come from, is that there is tremendous opportunity to relook at some of those positions, to have them more focused on the type of work that they're doing. And if that means redescribing or, changing those positions into project managers, I'm open to that. If there was a plan in place to
But
do
you
that,
understand that
I do.
we still want you to fill the
Yeah.
positions you have within the time period that you have listed on your vacancy report,
But-
so.
No, and I appreciate that. And my hope is that with us entering into the WIKI hiring program that DHERD has put together, that DOT, Department of Transportation, Highways has shown has been effective, that we'll be able to move faster to get those engineers on board and part of our team. The key is getting them, in the door,
That's right.
get them the job offer and get them to work,
Yeah,
right?
But I think you need to go back and delineate which positions you need actual engineers for,
Mhm.
and which positions that you typically or historically had engineers for that you could do project management.
Yeah, I'm open to exploring that.
Is there someone here responsible for engineering division?
Yeah, so Chris Kinimaka is here from Public Works Division.
I see.
And so I'd ask her to maybe come forward and she can offer
Well,
some.
you know what, though, why don't we
insight.
go through all that, then later on you can bring them all, because
Sure.
if not, we're gonna run out of time.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, Chair.
Sure. Can I bring up one thing
Yeah.
about the engineers? Okay, so it's one thing to fill the position, but it's another thing as to how do you get these projects that mean something? So the Senate President's Office is the only one that didn't have a bathroom
Hmm.
in there or water for that matter. And we went to DAGS and DAGS said it was gonna cost in excess of $100,000.
Hmm.
In excess of $100,000. It was crazy. So we said, what about if we just put a sink in there? They said it was gonna cost like 40,000. So I had an engineering that was volunteering with the office. We had him go in there and he came up with the idea of putting in the sink from across the men's bathroom. And it cost us to put the sump pump in for about $5,000, which is still a lot of money. But I can't understand why our engineers are doing that, or you guys sub it out, but that kind of practice gotta stop.
Mhm.
I mean, it's crazy, the kind of cost that these engineers are costing us, or I don't know, you guys put it out to bid, or you folks, hire these consultants and they give us this exorbitant cost.
Yeah.
How do you get around that?
Licensed engineers have to, follow certain rules and program. We all do, right? Follow certain rules and programs as it relates to the code, right?
Right, we did, we put in the sink and we followed the
Yeah.
code and it cost about 5,000.
Yeah.
It's still kind of high for a sink, but still, we did it. And yet, how come you guys couldn't have done that from the beginning? If we didn't keep looking, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have gotten it.
I apologize, Senator. I was
Yeah, I know. you
not
weren't
part
there,
of that, but that's
That's the
I
culture
certainly,
at
know,
DAGS.
yeah.
That's the culture at DAGS, so you need to change that.
I appreciate that, Senator. Okay, may I
Yeah,
continue?
go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I think I was at line item number 10, AGS 240, asking again for funds and positions to continue with the specific appropriation from Act 176. Again, just moving it into eventually into our base budget. Item number 11, AGS 240, again with procurement office, add funds and positions to continue specific appropriations for Act 168. I think this is the one that we were asking for them to make permanent, right? Not temporary, I believe. Yeah. So this one also, if just for note, when BNF put this forward, we had initially requested a permanent position for this particular request, and they had shifted it into temporary. So, we're just asking for reconsideration to make that into a permanent position.
Why
Um,
did BNF do that?
I don't.
We can ask them. That's why
Okay.
we saved BNF last.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll get to them.
I
Thanks.
have a thing on that question, if I may, the act
I think
provided
you should
for,
wait for a question.
oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Would you like to finish this so we can
Okay.
get to the point where
Thank-
we can ask questions?
And why do you want to let BNF off the hook?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so if we can move on, Chair, if it's okay. Item number 12, AGS 101. This is part of our accounting operations. We're adding funds and 7 additional, add funds and 7 FTE permanent positions for EFS. This is for the enterprise financial system that you're all very familiar with that we're moving forward on. But this will help us address some of the additional needs that are coming forth in assigning people to support that EFS and the build out of the EFS within the accounts or accounting division. Item number 13, AGS 231. This is adding some additional funds for energy, for electricity costs. We're asking for $1 million there for that. We do have, and we have entered into agreements with ESCOs. That's the energy service companies that have come through and done various different upgrades to address energy consumption, to bring down our overall cost of energy for the state, for our facilities. However, and unfortunately, just with the increasing cost of oil and just general electricity that we're buying off the grid, those costs continue to escalate. And so we're asking for an additional $1 million to support that. Item number 14, again, for the Hawai'i District Office, same scenario and situation. They've had increases in their electricity and their utilities. And so we're asking for some additional funding to support that increase and an anticipated increase in rates that Hawai'i District Office believes is coming forward from HECO. Item number 15, AGS 231. This particular program is part of our CSD operations. It's adding funds to help support our Kauai District Office and, specifically to support the increased cost of water for the cemetery that we oversee there. This is the Hanapepe Chinese, Filipino, and Portuguese cemetery there on Kauai. So we need some additional funds to support the water needs there. Item number 16, it continues on to, I believe, item number 17, but that is to request, this is the Kauai District Office. They're requesting additional funds and a full-time permanent groundskeeper position to help support the needs there on Kauai. This would also include a vehicle for and equipment for that particular individual. Item number 18, we're asking for a request to increase our revolving ceiling for fringe benefits. Fringe benefits, they're continuing to go up. And so we're asking for support in that request. Item number 19 adds funds for maintenance of past performance database. This is part of State Procurement Office, I believe, and they're asking for some additional funds to maintain that past performance database. Item number 20, AGS 251. Again, just asking to increase the revolving ceiling for fringe benefits for that program, as well as item number 21, AGS 252. Again, also asking for an increase in fringe benefits to support those two particular programs. And those programs are actually part of the automotive management division. So they are self-funded. AGS 879, item number 22 on the list, adds funds for our voting system contract and state match. This one we actually requested for a much larger amount. We did get 1.2 million. We've had some conversations with BNF about it. They understand why we asked for the original amount and why it's important that we get it. And so hopefully that will be in the governor's message going forward. Number 23 is AGS 871. We're asking to increase the trust fund ceiling for this particular program. This is for the Campaign Spending Commission. This will allow for them to be able to cover some of the public funds that need to be dispersed as part of the election process. And so rather than running up against or running into a situation where their ceiling does not allow them to pay out the funds that are required to be paid out in that process, we're asking for some additional flexibility there for the program to be able to support that. Item number 24, AGS 891. Is increasing a special fund increase for the E911 program. This one is to help support, some of the additional work that's going on within the counties to support infrastructure, as well as modernizing some of the processes and programs and equipment that they have that support our 911 call centers throughout the state. AGS 881. Item number 25 is to convert one temporary position to a permanent position for this program. This is for our State Foundation on Culture and Arts. And so, we're just asking to make that a permanent position for SFCA. Item number 26 is we're asking for full year funding for 10 positions within, I believe this is within ETS. And so we're asking for full year funding for these 10 positions that are going to be supporting the ongoing work of our people at our Enterprise Technology Services operation. Number 27, AGS 131, we're asking to add funds and 13 positions and 13 full-time equivalent positions for prior special project positions. We have, as I mentioned earlier, the EFS, the ERP system that we're working on. And so this is to make those positions permanent. We're going to need support going forward for that program to help, answer questions and troubleshoot and whatnot. And so this would help us solidify that program going forward. And our CIO is here as well to answer any questions specifically about that. Item number 28 is our request, again, it's part of ETS, to provide some additional funds to support ongoing ERP recurring costs to the tune of about 1.4, almost 1.5 million in fiscal year 24, and about 300,000 in fiscal year 25. Okay, moving on to item number 29, I believe it is. Again, AGS 131, this is for ETS. We're asking for funds to be able to support our Office 365 licenses. These particular licenses will allow us to be able to accommodate the growing needs that we have out there in terms of our employees, and reduce the amount of service outages that are being experienced by them. So just asking for your support with that. Item number 30 is for our Adobe licenses, also with ETS. You may have heard that there was a requirement for us to fund some of the different Adobe products that we have in a different way. There was, apparently a lot of additional software that was allowed to be utilized as part of the agreement with Adobe, which ended. And so we now need to have some additional funding to support specific Adobe licenses that help us do things like, Adobe Acrobat Pro, where we can, modify PDFs and be able to send things around for e-sign. So this is a fairly important request. 31, again, also with ETS, no funding. They did not provide funding, although we did request it in fiscal year 24. And they did provide partial funding, funding for our fiscal year 25 requests. And so we're asking, for your support as part of the ESRI program. If you're familiar with that, that's, GIS. And so a lot of the mapping that we do, Art Buto, his folks over there at DBED and those teams, but being able to support the licenses that we need so that everybody that wants to utilize and can utilize that particular piece of software has access to it. And so that's a pretty important request for us. Item number 32 is again also this was the refresh amount that BNF put in there for us. Again, we're not 100% sure how they came up with the $1.5 million refresh amount. We're appreciative, but we had specific requests for specific types of equipment in our original budget, and so hopefully this will help us address those requests and, perhaps more beyond that. So we'll see what happens there. Item number 33 is the request to add funds for our insurance program. It's a cost increase. I mean, as you're familiar with, and I'm sure we've been here before to talk to you about it, is that the cost of insurance for the state continues to increase. Right now, we're paying something like $24.5 million a year for our insurance coverage. When you think about, sort of what that means, we're insuring, we have about maybe $24 billion in assets, right, throughout the state. We have a $10 billion annual budget. So the $24.5 million that we pay, or the money that we pay to support our insurance requirements, I think is it's money well spent because it helps prevent risk, but it's also something we need to look at from a cost perspective. And then also last item on the list here is item number 34, and this particular request is to take that additional funding that we get to support our insurance program and to increase the revolving fund to allow us to be able to utilize those funds. So, Chair, that's what was included in the governor's decision that came down to you folks, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that, or if you'd like me to move into what we're going to request.
Well, yeah, other than what you alluded to earlier, that they didn't fully fund or rejected completely, are there anything that's not in the governor's decisions that are in addition to that? First?
Yeah, there are. So you're talking about new requests.
Completing your.
Yeah.
request.
Yeah. So we actually do have a few that we've included. One of those actually happens to be well, let me just start here. Our archives division was recently made aware that they had the ability to acquire a significant number of original photos, historical and cultural photos, and original negatives of some of the earliest times when, people were able to take photos here in Hawaii. So dating back, I don't know, like, Adam, what is it, couple hundred years or 100-something years?
Back to 1873.
There you go, 1873. So, but it's one of the oldest collections here in Hawaii. And so we were just recently told that this was going to be made available. And we would like to start negotiations to acquire that and to have that part of the public archive so that the public can enjoy and appreciate, and we can preserve those very important pieces of history.
What's the budget request? associated with that?
We're asking for 250,000, and that was based on some internal discussions that our archivists, had related to that.
Is that archives one archive for the state? Because I know that other agencies have their own archives. So
I think
what
he's talking about the state archive.
the state
Yes.
archive? Oh, okay. the
State
county.
archives,
Okay,
yes. Some-
okay. Because we have some archives that needs to be addressed with the individual agencies, like DLNR as an
Yeah.
example.
Is there a request outside of their current revenues that they get from fees and the like then? So this is an A fund request that you're gonna be seeking?
Yes, it is. It is a general fund request. Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, we are asking that funds be returned to support Bishop Museum and Iolani Palace. So that's to the tune of about 9.5 million. So that we can ensure that SFCA is able to provide support to those very important programs. And, we just want to make sure that that's included in our request. Additionally, we're asking for about $200,000 to support a plant nursery. One of the things that we noticed is that, there are many places where we can deploy our own plants, potted plants, and where we can also deploy and install or plant trees that we can propagate. And we want to be able to do that, kind of on our own, because CSD, does all the ground maintenance. They're out there constantly, right, working on our different facilities. Good example of that, of where we could take advantage of that, is right downstairs in the rotunda, where we had those 4 planter boxes that used to have
Next to the elevators.
trees. Yeah.
That was ridiculous.
You'll notice right now they're filled with plants, right? I mean, I think it looks
It's
really,
been pulled, but I've always said, why are we having, what do they call it? Those not real plants anyway.
yeah, the
It's
fake.
embarrassing for Hawaii.
No, it is, and it's
not to have
unacceptable.
Real plants.
Yeah, and so we actually,
Somebody took it out from the elevators.
Yeah.
here.
and obviously theft is a big issue for us, right? Because people, even those plants that we put down there, people are already stealing them. People are already taking them. And so, we need to just be aware of what's going on. But I think most importantly, we need to beautify, right, our very important facilities and the grounds that we have. In order to do that, having our own plant nursery where we can propagate, the type of plants that we need and we'd like to deploy, out there, it will be very important for us. And so,
Where are you going to do this?
yeah, where's the positions going to come from? Well, our CSD folks can actually start working on it. And I think, was it by, where's Richard? Richard, why don't you come up? Or where were we thinking about? Yeah.
Come up because.
Yeah. Yeah.
The base
Here,
yard.
this is Richard Louis, our acting administrator for Central Services Division.
Hi, the thought process behind it is, we have 7.5 acres that we put on a base yard. And a lot of it is open to the sun. But there are easement areas that we already have sprinkler systems that are basically working. And also the other thought was, it wasn't totally thought out exactly how exactly $200,000 would go, but it would be at least the seed money, at least to get it there. But it'd be also to look at working with other state agencies. There's DLNR, right? Department of Ag, even Department of Education, which we're working with, as well as libraries. And also, you know, a sister agency is Department of Transportation, which is right next door with their 7.5 acres. So since we already had the land that was already cleared, for us to go and put some things there would be relatively inexpensive, as well as trying to partner with other agencies, other groups, you know, the
We
schools,
actually have a tree nursery plants out of DLNR,
right?
and they're all over the place. They got the plants, so.
Right, but we
Yeah.
could probably help propagate
Sure.
with them since we have it and just work with them. That was the idea, since we have the nice sunny land there, and we could offer it with the existing conditions, sprinkler systems that we had there. So it wouldn't take up a lot of our time.
Good start. I always wondered why we were having those fake trees next to our private elevator. Oh, good start.
Okay.
Okay, questions? Senator Lee.
Briefly follow up while we're on this topic, you know, for I think 10 years, this has come up in these sorts of briefings. But for a lot of our particular, like around here, Capital District, over at the State Foundation, outside the State Museum, you know, some of those properties, there used to be like a whole bunch of foliage and all kinds of stuff, and it all got ripped out in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Presumably because it costs money to take care of, or something to that effect. Is that? You don't have to go down the rabbit hole on it, but just would this solve that problem, I guess?
Well, we're trying to help beautify, as you know, that there's a lot of problem with vagrancy, and as the comptroller said, that we just put plants into the planters there, and people come and already have lifted it as their own, I guess. So, but we're trying to get it back where we've actually, our crews were missing our irrigation guy who's out with a long-term injury. But between all the different groups, the grounds, RNA, repair, maintenance, and custodial, we're getting people to all the groups work together. So if you look, a lot of the areas, the sprinkler systems are now working, or getting them to work to beautify where we're at. So to partially answer your question, part of it is due to other people destroying our area, tearing up the irrigation systems and sprinkler systems. And so we haven't been able to repair them. So we're back trying to repair stuff on the smaller scale or the bigger scale, where the larger, especially in downtown areas. So I think you'll see that.
So I appreciate that. I raise this for 2 reasons. One, because for example, areas like the State Museum, where you have grounds that could be rented out for various functions and events, like you walk there now and like, I don't think anybody in their right mind would want to rent out what's basically an ugly space as a result. So it's sort of like inhibiting our ability to capitalize on the facilities we have. But then secondly, across the street at like the Leahy Place, where it's privately held, it's got perhaps the most beautiful grounds in all of downtown, clearly can be done right. So is the intent to do it right, I guess, is ultimately my question.
Well, I'll just very quickly, we're heading in that direction.
Okay, maybe we can follow up later on. Thank you, Chair.
Is he responsible for our pool outside? Is that your Kuliana?
Yeah.
Yes.
The moat.
Okay, can you brief us what's happening?
Yeah, that'd be
I-
nice.
I can tell you a little bit about the project, and then if you want more detail about the project itself, Chris Kinimaka from PWD can give you a little bit more
But you
detail.
can, you can
but-
start with your approach on
Yeah.
how you're gonna deal with the beautification of the area, like how, following up on Senator Lee's question. But it's not just this, but all state. What's gonna be your approach for all state facilities?
Yeah. I'll let Richard talk a little bit about that. And then I'd like to follow up with something as well, if you don't mind, Chair.
No, well, you lead the direction.
Oh,
though.
okay.
So what's
No, I
gonna be
appreciate
your
that.
approach
Okay.
so that they can
I
implement your
apologize.
approach?
I thought you were directing it to Richard, but I definitely can answer that. my approach as it relates to our facilities is to maintain them at a level that we can be proud of, so that when our residents and our visitors, our employees, our staff go and visit these places, they're proud of going to these places. They feel safe when they go there. The grounds are well maintained. If there's ground covering, it's well maintained. It doesn't look like it's being abandoned or, allowed to just kind of sit and just deteriorate. As it relates to, as an example, the Capital Campus District area, Richard and I have been having a lot of discussions about how to redirect resources so that we can protect, especially like the memorials that are on our campus, keep them clean, keep them functional, keep them maintained and respectful, in a respectful way, so that when people go there and visit, like if they're visiting to reflect on their loved ones that gave their lives in service, that they're entering a place that is being properly maintained and cared for. This is something that we have been talking about. How do we push out beyond just the Capital District? But I feel that we got to also show an example here of what we can do. Richard and his team, and through Denton and those guys, have been working on this campus pretty much nonstop since I came on board in December, because I feel like, especially here, the more activity that you have going on out there, like as an example, cutting the grass or trimming, growing, weed whacking, whatever it is, the more people that we have out there active doing things, the less likely you're going to have people setting up tents and just having homeless issues that we've been experiencing here on the campus. And I think we're all aware of that. But it's not just here. It's happening at King Kalakaua building. It's happening at Kalani Moku building. And so we need to take that approach where we're actively maintaining our properties to help beautify it and keep it safe. And so that is going to be my focus and my goal. And I've been working with Richard and his team on that. How do we be able to create, and you mentioned this, right? Roving teams that can go to different places. And so that we can utilize our resources in a different way, right? In a more efficient way, to be able to have that visibility, to be able to address problems like what you were describing, Senator. There should be no reason why that Hemmeter building is not pristine, right? But it's hard when you're trying to just keep up with things. And so again, Chair, our focus is going to be on making sure that our properties are maintained to the highest level that we possibly can, so that when our public goes out there and experiences or goes to those various different facilities that we manage, they can be proud of that. And you can be proud of that as legislators supporting that effort.
So how do you do that though? Because you take like the Wahiawa Civic Center, and we actually had to add additional funds for overnight security.
Yep.
The problem is, which is really awkward, is that the extra security that we're paying for is not on weekends and not on holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So during the weekend, people broke into the building and stole CTAR's catalytic converter. I'm not sure why DAGs would only allow weeknights to secure and not the whole week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, security doesn't end at 4:30, right? I mean,
Yes.
That's plain and simple. I mean, it should be 24/7. I don't know. I'll have to go back and revisit that to find out why they made that adjustment. It could be a funding issue.
We added additional funds.
Yeah.
DAGs gave us the amount to put in for additional 24/7.
For Wahiawa.
For why? So we gave the
Yeah.
additional amount, and then you didn't do 24/7 after you asked. After the department gave us the budgeted amount that they needed for 24/7.
Mm-hmm. So, Chair, my commitment to you is to make sure that we follow through
But
with
that
what
should be
we told you.
we
we're
should
gonna
have
do.
a systematic approach, because
Yeah.
that's so awkward for
Yeah.
us to one by one try to figure this out
I
as we
understand.
try to deal with all of our state buildings. And I hear your sense of urgency for the Capital District, but most of our residents are going to say, "Hey, wow, see these guys, they only take care of themselves.
Yeah.
It's only going to be Capital District. We got to figure out how we're going to maintain all of our buildings and secure them."
Mhm. Yeah, I understand. And that is our intent, to take what we're doing here as a model to be able to apply that in other areas. But as it relates to security, we certainly will take a look at that and come up with a plan that doesn't just address security in one particular location, but
And
has,
see roving.
sure.
They're going from building to building.
Yep.
to kind of deal with it. I'm not
Even-
sure, but
Even here on the campus, right, or the district, I use the campus because the district is actually pretty significant, right, in size. It doesn't just incorporate, it's not only the capital, but incorporating that type of roving patrols into, this particular area, I think would be extremely important as well.
okay, but how does that, at some point, you need to
Mhm.
articulate those thoughts into how that
Yeah.
is shown in your budget,
No, I agree. I agree with you, Senator Chair.
because
Yeah, you
Security that.
I give DLNR credit because they have a homeless coordinator
Mm,
to address the homeless problem on point on their facilities. And from what I'm understanding, the strategy is to have more maintenance, grass cutting going on, which would somehow deter the homeless population. So I guess what I echo what he says, there's a strategic plan which is going to be reflected in your positions. Like what caught my attention was the $200,000 for this landscaping greenery. Well, where do you get the number from? Well, we just kind of pulled it out of thin air. Or what are the positions to do this? What are the funding and positions for irrigation, repair and security and all of these things? So I guess I just echo what he says. And
mm,
as director, you're going to have to articulate this through the budget, through positions and through actual things.
Yeah.
So you don't have situations where it's all ad hoc.
I understand that. And, Chair McKelvey, you've been to the county building on Maui many times, right, over the years.
Unfortunately, yes.
And, you see when you go there, almost every day, you'll see somebody out there maintaining property, right? You see multiple people out there maintaining the property. And what you don't see is what we see here on this campus. And so kind of taking that approach to having activity going on, I think is going to be really important to addressing not all, but some of the homeless issues that we have here. We have also started working with James Shiba from the governor's office, who's the homeless coordinator for the governor, to find and develop a strategy that will help us help those people that need it the most here on our facilities, not just here, but in our facilities throughout the state. So I understand what you're saying. But a lot of the security also, just Chair, a lot of that's contracted. And so a lot of that work, we don't have security guard. We don't have state employees that are security guards. DAGS does not. And
yeah, but DAX has security contracts.
yeah, no, we do. No, absolutely. And that's what I'm saying is that we need to go back, take a look at those security contracts. Is it going to meet our current needs? And if it's not, to your point, what is it going to take to move that to the next level so that we're properly
Right, so
addressing?
just make sure you have efficiency. So next to the current civic center, there's the library.
Yep.
But the contract, I think, is only for the civic center. So then there's no security guard at the library, which
that
is literally like right next door,
Makes no sense. I don't know why.
which DAG still has to maintain. Because you do, I don't know, you gotta figure that out.
We will.
Senator Kim,
Just follow up. So what we see here is I see 3 guards downstairs, security, sitting at a desk. And this has been going on since, I don't know, months now. Times is nobody here. And yet 3 people sitting there when they can be doing something else and patrolling or whatever. So who made that determination? And then there's 2 by the glass doors or 3 by the glass doors going in and out, and there's hardly anybody coming through.
Okay.
I mean, is that a security contract? Or-
We're doing it in cooperation with PSD. We're funding it.
What are we
And
funding it
so
to the tune of what?
I,
Did anybody question that? Did anybody go and check to see if we really need all 3 of them sitting there? Have you done that since you've been on?
I understand what they're doing and what their
Did
functions
you
are.
go down and see whether or
Yeah.
not that it was, that we need?
I have.
So you've determined that we need to continue to do that?
I think it's important to have a presence. And
but-
the question is, can we expand that?
We need 3 people to change a light bulb. I mean, you got 3 people sitting there at time. I can see on opening day maybe, but
Uh-huh.
on a regular basis before this, nobody going there. Every day I would see them just sitting there doing nothing. This is embarrassing. I mean, that we're spending that kind of money. when-
why don't you say you're gonna go review and look
We
at it?
will. Thank you, Chair.
Because if not,
I
you're
will.
not gonna win this.
I understand, Chair. Thank you.
Speaking of,
No,
what happened to our X-ray machines?
X-ray machines.
2 X-ray machines that was purchased.
Metal detectors.
Yeah, that's actually, we've been trying to figure that out because that was brought to our attention that we apparently had acquired some machines. And so we're in the process of identifying where those are located. It's probably with PSD. Nail that down and find out where those are located.
To do that, we've asked for that time and budget briefing after budget briefing. Does it even work?
When he was the ex-director, we were asking for it.
We'll take a look at that, Senator, and get information for you on it.
It's crazy. But for what? We've never ever once put it up. I raised this question before we bought it.
Mhm.
Before we bought it, I raised this question and come true to form. We've never seen it. It's never been used. I don't know why we spent the money. We had a grant, but that's no reason to spend the money just because we had a grant. The same time you folks did the finger thing that doesn't work all the time. It's frustrating.
Well, as it relates to the capillary center, we understand the frustration with that. And we've been working with PSD who actually manages that and the contractor. And the contractor has assured us that they're going to be bringing in some new equipment to replace those existing capillary scanners so that hopefully you won't run into those issues going forward, Senator.
What about the parking, finally, our
Yeah. Or get,
road that comes in here?
Uh-huh.
Potholes, big. It's
Miller
not
Street.
full. Yeah, are they gonna ever pave that?
We'll take a look at that as well, Senator. Thank
You don't
you.
drive on that road?
I do. I'm
What do you
familiar.
think?
I know I definitely need some TLC. So yes, I understand what you're saying.
What about the private elevator? Are we gonna?
Yeah, there's no
Oh, you
key,
need-
so.
you need a
yeah,
key.
Only on fingers, not oftentimes
Yep.
it works.
So that's what we're just talking about is the capillary device that's located there. The vendor who is managed actually by PSD, Public Safety, is going to be replacing the hardware that's in there.
When?
Do we
Tomorrow's
know?
opening day, you're
Yes.
gonna have hundreds of people here.
My understanding, I just talked to Security Resources and they had tested, I guess, just the other day. And so they're, obviously it's not gonna make it during opening, unfortunately. But I know they supposedly have the whatever 20 that they need on order, so that's supposed to be coming in. And
why don't you have the
So-
backup with the key
What
so
is the
that if it
change?
doesn't
Are we
work,
using
you know?
the key
My-
type that are being used by the hotels?
My understanding is with the new capillary, with the new fingerprint, this is supposed to resolve the problems that I know some of you are having,
So
is my understanding.
with no key and no card.
Yeah. you
I'm
should
not
have a
familiar with
backup.
my understanding is the capillary, the fingerprint is supposed to be with this new machine that's coming in, is supposed to be able to take care of
What
what the original needs
that's
were.
what they told us at the beginning and it doesn't work.
Can we call short recess?
I want to hear about our plans
Wait.
before we go into.
Okay, reconvening. Okay, so you can answer why don't we go with the capital pond? The status.
All right, very good. So as it relates to just general maintenance of the pond, so Richard and his team were responsible for the general maintenance prior to it being closed down. However, the project itself is split up into multiple phases. The initial phase, which is going to start in May of this year, right after the legislative session ends, will focus on the Diamond Head Pond initially, right?
This side.
Yes, correct. where we're having most of the significant water intrusion, right, is happening into the Senate chambers and that area. And so that project will start in May. Should be about an 8-month or so project. And what's going to happen there is they're going to take off the layers of material that are between sort of the ceiling, if you will, of the offices that are beneath it, and everything that's above that, so that they can then re-waterproof that area, and then seal it up, and then prepare it for the eventual finishing, which currently is the debate is whether or not it's going to be water, like a water feature again, which I would strongly advise against, or if it would be some sort of water-like feature. So if you go to the State Museum, like you were mentioning, Senator, the pool that's there in the Hemeter building, something similar to that, where they put like a glass top over it that gives an effect of water, right? So it still kind of keeps with the original theme and the intent, but it will help us to ensure that we don't have water issues like what we've experienced
When
here
do you guys
recently.
make that decision?
The decision on what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
So we have a request in for the EVA side pool. That's the $33.5 million request to do the EVA side pool, exactly like
No,
we're doing the
when do-
Diamond Head.
When do you make the decision if we're gonna go with something that's not liquid and something that's water?
We have been working with SHPD because SHPD has to opine on that. And so Chris and her team have been working very closely with them. They feel, based on the conversations that they've had, that they will be willing to move forward with an alternative to water.
And that's expensive.
It is, because then you have less maintenance, ongoing maintenance. You have to worry about water evaporating, having to refill it with potable water, right? So will be more.
Well, it takes money away from other projects too. So if we can
Yeah, we
just
understand.
make a decision and go with it.
Yeah. And then we can take down those barriers and, restore the capital to its.
Yeah, that's one of my
prominence.
concerns, is the barriers, because a lot of perception is like we're trying to board
Understood.
ourselves in, and I don't want that to be, I don't think that's accurate, but that becomes the perception.
Yeah, and if I can, just really quick, the reason why the barriers are up, and even though the project doesn't start until May,
Safety.
it is exactly.
But that's where
Exactly.
we have to just make a decision so we can take that down.
Yep, I agree, Chair.
Just as an aside, just something to consider as we go forward, if it ends up being something that's not water, it seems like the most ideal place to go pitch a tent. Or if you're protesting, go take up residence. Yeah, well, just leave it there.
You don't have people throwing rocks on the glass over at Hemeter or trying to sleep on it or walk on it. So when you contract this glass, I assume it's going to be a high tensile, super, so all that cost is going to be.
Well, it could be tile.
Could be tile, yeah, it could, yeah. We haven't decided on a final, treatment, for that particular area. So, but these are just ideas that we've been discussing with SHPD as an alternative.
Chair, I have a question. Since we have Richard here, do you have a plan? We were talking about the grounds, but also for the buildings, the state-owned buildings that you do custodial services, because you're asking for 7 positions. I'm just wondering what your plan is, whether it's roving or how you deal with it. The previous administrator said the standard was, I think he called it moderately dingy. And we're looking at how we can be more inviting to the public and have our buildings look at least beyond moderately dingy. It would be good. So if you have a plan and what that cost might be and how you're going to do it.
Well, right now, we have, as the other senators had said, we do have some existing positions besides the 7 new ones that you folks are adding in. Unfortunately, one thing about at these lower level positions, it's much easier to fill because of the lesser requirements for hiring. So our intent is we're working closely with HR to get people in with the existing positions that we have. And then to answer your question regarding the other 7 positions, well, it's kind of it answers both of your questions, because we do have I'm trying to remember the right terminology. We do have like a roving crew, so part of the 7 positions will fill existing positions at work, but we still will have a roving. I'm trying to remember the right terminology, but they will be able to jump to other buildings as needed, depending on sickness or where the need will be. So to answer your question, yes, we will have a staff and have had a staff. It's just that those positions have been vacant, but you folks restored it from my understanding last year.
And so you're working with HR. So part of it is not having these roving people, but that the whole staff would be moving to where you have teams where you can clean all of our buildings, all of our state-owned buildings, and maybe even looking at your lower level positions so that you can consolidate some of the work and get higher level so they can do a lot of different things on the team rather than just, you know, having their own job to do or sweeping versus, I don't know.
Correct. No, we're
Yeah.
looking at that. And I know I had discussions with you earlier or later last year, and when I first came in, that, you know, we're looking to hopefully standardize. We have 80+ janitor positions currently. And, you know, we really want to try to get it, as you had said, so we can bring the level up where we try to standardize the level of work that they're doing in terms of schedule, what they clean, how they do stuff. So, I mean, I wish I could say we have a lead place, ability class A, but you know, unfortunately we don't, but we're working in that direction with the staff because now we have a new CSD manager. We just got our second building manager. We were missing 2. We hope we'll get a third soon, but we're using other staff within CSD to assist in oversight. But again, as you had talked to me last year, is, you know, we need to be consistent in terms of the training and try to get consistent training, at least keep a certain standard, which will then bring up the rest of the standard. Of course, with that comes the morale and things like that too. But we are moving in that direction because now we're starting to fill out more of our staff where we're at.
So
So
you
in
had
terms of
the
training-
generous 3 supervisors you said weren't really supervising. So are you really looking at the whole career ladder? or
Maybe
whatever
we'll
you
go
call it?
into subject matter. This because
Mm.
we're getting way into the weeds of reorganization.
Right, I could talk to you a little deeper or others that are interested in.
I mean, I think the main thing is how are you going to ensure that your budget reflects these thoughts? Because if not, we're just going in circles about what, hypothetically speaking, and we got to it's already 2:30 and we have DOT waiting.
So
Just a plan and
the
budget.
plan is to fill the
Your budget.
position,
Your
to
budget.
fill all the positions, you know,
That's not a plan. That's your same old.
well. We also have new supervisors. CSD has changed because we have new people. And what we're trying to do is up where we were before, which unfortunately was not as high as we'd like it to be, and provide more supervision as well as training to have people do more, be more effective in what we're doing and to be able to respond, because we have, say, 30+ different buildings on Oahu, and the standard should be the same. And that's what we're trying to do is get
Well,
our
there's the
staff.
standards and then there's the organizational chart to ensure flexibility. So I
Right.
think that's what part of what everybody's looking for.
And to answer your question, we do have we do have roving crews. We have sort of like 2 districts outside, you know, if you want to call it outside of Honolulu. And I know right now we're taking a look at, we're restricted by the union that we can't just grab people from the outside area and pull them in, I guess, unless there's an emergency, but we can't just pull them in. So we're working with our HR and see what we can do with that. But we do have roving crews on both sides and how we can best utilize them to be more efficient. But part of it is, again, it is the training and the standard, so we can be more efficient. And then that will raise, no question, the standard and the morale. So we have staff that, all our staff as well as myself are going out to meet our all of our 80+ janitors, because my understanding is they have never seen, or they haven't seen a lot of the upper management within CSD. And we're going out there for them to understand who we all are, and we're there to help and assist. We're not there to, to dictate or to, make sure they're doing their job. We're there to assist them and help them.
Okay, Vice Chair.
Elections office. The request was about 4 million and we got 1.5, so what aren't we getting for the 1.5?
So the 4 million request, or about 4 million request, is for the vote counting system contract for the 2024 election. So without that, we wouldn't be able to pay the vendor for our 2024 election.
So you're getting 1.5, so what's the thinking in the discussions you had with the governor's office on why only 1.5 at this point?
So previously we would pay for, so the way the cost sharing structure is organized is the state pays 50% and the counties pay 50%. So previously the way the counties would get directly billed for half of that 4 million. What we're thinking this year is if we pay for the $4 million, we can use that to offset their share cost sharing cost for such things such as postage for the mail, voter service centers, all those kind of things. We can use that to offset so that we don't end up paying them a whole bunch more for their expenses.
When it comes to the counties, I think we saw in this last election that they were a little different in whether they made available information on how many people had voted and whether or not they were willing to give someone who requested it the names of people who had already voted. Is that policy set at your level or at the county level?
It's at the county level. Each county is responsible for their own voter registration rolls. So that's where that comes from. So that information that they share is based on their.
So whether or not they chose to update the public during the course of the election, that was up to the counties?
It is up to the counties.
Was that a matter of equipment or just personnel or?
I'm not sure why they did it. My guess would be.
I mean, with the city, I mean, you could get, fairly recent information on, where the voters had voted and you plan accordingly. I think, Maui County, you couldn't get any information.
It just depends. A lot of it depended on the comfort level of each clerk. So I know with the city, they're just more open to having that kind of data. I'm not sure why Maui chose not to provide that.
Now, is that something that the election commission could give some policy direction to the clerk?
I mean, we could, but whether or not they choose to follow it, it's up to the clerks.
Okay. I have a second question though. Yeah, go ahead. On a different area. Can you just tell me right now, as far as the budget implementation, the quarterly allotment, is it restricted or are you getting your full quarterly allotment?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so with the appropriation that's given to us, we have the allocation from BNF, and that's where the restrictions, the balance would be the allocation, and with that amount, we allotted.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying the current allotment, quarterly allotment, is it showing a restriction or are you getting the full quarterly amount?
It shows the restriction amount, your appropriation, your restriction.
So there's still a restriction on spending
That is
despite the alleged $2.6 billion surplus.
That is correct.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
I had a question about the Keawe Health Center in Hilo.
For Public Works.
Yeah, so DOH is asking for more money for a new home in Hilo. But I thought the plan was to renovate the existing building.
It's a shell right now.
Yeah, but they took so long.
Aloha chairs, vice chairs, members of both committees. For the Keawe Hilo Health Center, we had moved forward with the renovation. We had full plans to do that. Unfortunately, when we started to do the demolition, we discovered that the walls were not built structurally sound as they were to be designed.
Yeah, but it was empty and like that for several years, not just. It takes you several years to be in the beginning stages.
There was delays in starting the demolition, unfortunately. And all we can answer to is that once they did start, they did find that the walls were
But what were the cause of all the delays?
more procedural for us on our side. I think management, because we have shortage of staffing. on
See,
the
that's a
island.
problem though.
Yeah, it is.
Because that's costing the state more money. Because it's just falling off of somebody's desk.
Yeah.
Nobody's paying attention.
Yes, I mean, that's another division for us. They were short-staffed and shorthanded, and so they're.
Yeah, but at
doing
some
what
point
they
you have to
can,
yell
yeah.
help.
Yes.
At some point,
Yes.
somebody has to say, okay, if we don't address this now, it's gonna start taxing, costing the state a lot more money.
Yes.
There's no sense of urgency in dealing with these issues.
No, I agree with you. And when we found out, when Public Works found out, we immediately jumped on it. And that's when we found out what the condition was and got our crew on board with the consultants and discovered that we actually had to abandon the building. There was just no way that we could restore the walls. And that's why it is unfortunate that we have to go back in now, demolish the entire building and look at options. And Department of Health asked to build a new facility. And that's what we're looking at. But parallel to that, we're looking at potentially buying facilities in the area. So we're looking at the double prong approach. But it is
Okay,
devastating to
but
see.
you need to fix this.
Yeah.
Because how long were they out? How long were the DOH staff out of the building?
I think several years now,
Yeah.
probably about 2 years.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Kona Hospital.
No,
The
Hilo.
yeah.
No, Hilo has no roof. It doesn't even have four walls
It's in your
now.
district.
Yeah, I know, but you're saying
Yeah.
Ave DOH. I don't know about Akea.
No, it's Keawe. It's right by the old downtown post office. I'll show you when we come back to Hilo. I have a question. at Hilo.
Okay, all right.
About this project?
Okay.
But thank you for that.
No, so how are you guys gonna deal with it?
Yeah,
And
that's,
can you guys give us a number of projects that are just sitting on somebody's desk?
Yeah.
we'll take a look at that and get that information for you, Chair. Yeah, I can understand your concern and I share that with you.
Well, if the legislator is like, I know the projects that we put in, so I'm
Yeah.
constantly bugging her about my
Mhm.
projects.
Mhm.
But I don't know if everyone else is doing that. And granted,
Yeah.
it's their kuleana, but it costs the state money.
Yeah, so
So, I mean, No, I can share that to the extent that we can. We've had to really jerry rig our support services. We've sent our crew out to the districts as well. Maui was down to like one person. And so we have had to go out and do triage to help. We're trying to get positions and we're actually hiring a lot more consultants to do construction management for us. It
No, that
costs
goes back
more.
to what I was saying earlier. Why
is.
don't you guys do more project management instead of engineers?
So we voluntarily helped look at the project management program. We looked at what the qualifications would be. We worked with DHERD on what our recommendations were. When the position descriptions came out, we were frankly surprised that all they require is a bachelor's degree and no actual construction or engineering or, planning, design experience. So for us, having to take someone pretty much right out of college and pay them at the SR 26 rating, it's the same rating we would for our engineers, and then have to put our managers on top of them because now we're teaching them, it actually creates more problems for us. With the 30% vacancies that we're experiencing, we have 91 positions and 31 vacancies, we're leaking from both sides. We don't have sustainability with new staff, and we have a silver tsunami where our baby
Yeah, but
boomers.
why don't we do
leaving.
what we did with Department of Labor and IT? So Department of Labor had about $300,000. They paid for internships that were spread throughout the departments. So what we could do is those graduates could be taking an internship position that we pay for through Department of Labor. And then that's your testing. If they pass the 1 year, and then you can hire them.
what I'd love to work with you on is because we did have a co-op plan with University of Hawaii, right? We hired engineers. We brought them in right out of college as engineer ones, and we worked with them. And we gave them the opportunity to come up through the ranks to get their license. Unfortunately, so many of our agencies that do procurement, we do it from a project management standpoint. So we need folks that can take a project and just run it. We don't give them the skills they need to get their license. So I'd love to do a sidebar and talk about that co-op, because one of the things we could do with the private sector is work with them, because that's where they get the good hands-on training, how to design, how to read plans, you know, how to do construction, and work with them, give them state jobs. They bring the students up to speed, and when they hit that level, we give them jobs. But I'd
Yeah.
love to discuss
We
that.
just need some pipeline
Exactly.
and then we can work this out. But how much do we still own all the consultants and the contractors from that project?
I will have to double check on that.
So we already spent money on the existing building, even though we're gonna now demolish it.
Yeah, we did terminate, or we are going to terminate the contract because we stopped all the construction. We got them to where they're going to demolish the building down to grade. We have some shoring left to do to keep the building from imploding and creating issues. So.
So
we
how
are
much of
working-
that was the responsibility of the consultant to determine?
That
'Cause
one, that one is tough. You had to open up the walls, and we were surprised at what we found when you start literally cracking open the concrete. They were missing rebar, the concrete was falling off, and we worked with Shifty. There was nothing to restore. We would have to build walls around the walls to preserve what was there.
But then it sat vacant or nobody
Yes.
paid attention to it for over 2 years.
Yes, and that I can't entirely answer for. Just that we jumped on it as soon as we knew.
So did we order materials for the new building?
Fortunately not. Yeah, we weren't at that point yet.
Okay, so no materials were ordered.
That's my understanding. I'll verify.
Okay.
So I just want to do just a round of follow-up on that because this is the first time I'm in GVO and I have passed that building. It is like 90% demolished, really. You know, there's barely any walls even standing up on that. So it surprised me that originally your first answer was you are gonna continue renovating when there's really nothing to renovate.
No.
So
I'm-
is
I'm-
it now the
yeah.
idea, so you guys are gonna come back with a complete demolition and plan, right?
Yeah, so Senator, when I came up, what I said, what our plan was to do complete renovation, you know, keep the exterior walls and redo the inside. But after we demolished the inside and opened up the walls, that's when we realized
Well,
can't do it.
you
So-
drive there now and there's like nothing, really, just a couple of
Exactly.
walls
And
standing.
that's our intent, is to take it down to the grade because it's just really hazardous for the public
Okay.
to leave it up. But we are not going to renovate now. We're looking at either building new or looking to acquire a facility.
But DOH buildings seem to be problematic for some reason. So this is one, and then the state hospital is one. So I'm not sure.
Age possibly.
Well, that's a new building though, the state hospital. Is that open already?
Oh, yes, they've been occupied since April of this year, fully occupied.
And everything's fixed.
Mostly. We have one last item with vinyl tile, and that should be done within about a month and a half.
Questions?
Not with this, but I have later on.
The question is, when you guys came for the money for the renovation, did anybody talk to even go look at the building physically?
When
And walk
you-
through the building?
They have. So the consultant can look at the building, you can look at the outside, and it
So-
looks perfectly fine. You can take pictures of it. But as we got into the wall themselves, they're actually demolishing the inside and hit the exterior wall, and the surfacing started to fall off. And that kind of destructive testing, we don't normally do in a building unless we already suspect something's wrong. We did not suspect that it would not have been built to code.
So the the company that's doing the renovation is now gonna be doing the demolition?
They already are demolishing the exterior walls to grade, yes.
Okay, I had a question about, oh, go ahead.
Hi, Chris. Can you update us on the status of the stadium RFP? I was under the assumption that the governor in the state of the state is gonna mention something about the project moving along, but can you tell us that it's a RFP for the stadium gonna be signed before next Monday?
We are not going to be issuing the RFP before next week, Monday, but we are looking at issuing the RFPs before the end of the first quarter. We're rushing to get it done as early as possible. We are very thankful and fortunate that all of the key state agencies are now working together. And as you know, that's refreshing. So we're getting all of the technical feedback that we've needed for the last 2 years. We have been meeting during holidays and weekends, and really all determined to work together to get those RFPs out in the best way possible.
And I was looking through your budget worksheets and I didn't see if you were asking for any extra personnel to meet the pending workload for both the stadium as well as the retail around it or the real estate around it. Are you planning to staff up in anticipation of pushing forward with the stadium development?
So that's a two-pronged question really for us with 30 vacancies right now. And most of them technical. If we can fill our positions with the wiki hire and other measures that we're taking, that would help us a lot there. A lot of the management that needs to happen is with the stadium authority, and we're working closely with them as well. You know, to have to oversee and manage this type of construction operations is big, but we're working with them to build that crew.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. I want to talk about the schools, the school repair and maintenance neighbor island districts. Who do I talk to?
No,
Which
ask
dis-
him and then he'll pull them up.
Okay.
Which
so-
district are you referring to?
Okay, so
Senator?
basically, Big Island.
Okay,
So when we talk to specifically my district, Pahoa, and there's a school gym there where there were new floors that were put in, but then the roofs were never fixed. So the new floors are now deteriorating. And for the past 3 years, I talked to the Kaz, who was now our school facilities person, Chad Keone for years. And he had told me a couple of years ago that it's in the works, but then when I talked to Scott Pujii, he says that it's DAG's problem. So in your budget, because it's when Scott Pujii looked at the DOE budget to fix this, which has been going on for 3 years, and the new flooring is now being destroyed because of the leaking roof, he says that there's no DOE budget to fix it because they're relying on DAGs. I guess it's like a chicken and egg. How do we know, and for neighbor island districts, who we ask to fix our schools?
Thank you, Senator. Chair, if I may, if you have questions or issues about facilities in your district,
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to sit down and talk with you about those issues. Unfortunately, our administrator from Hawaii Island was not able to be here. She's actually not feeling very well. So,
Okay.
but one of the things that I've been trying to do is get to the neighbor islands, so that I can visit with not only the district administrator, but then also the schools that we support in those districts, so that I can personally understand what the challenges are that they're facing over there. I'm a firm believer that, you need to go and you need to visit and you need to interact in order to fully understand what you're responsible for. You can't just, you can do a lot with paper and teams and stuff like that, but you got to be on the ground to be able to understand that. And so for me, Senator, I plan on going to all the neighbor island district offices,
Okay.
again, to meet with not only the administrator, but those that we're providing services to, so that we can understand, like to your point, what's not getting taken care of, what's not ending up in the budget as a request, so that we can get that done. I will tell you right now that the last thing that I want is for us to spend money fixing a floor,
Right.
only to have it ruined because we didn't fix the roof first.
And frankly, I'm just going to let you know that for East Hawaii,
Yeah.
because of the volcano, we have a lot of acid rain.
Understood.
So our tin roofs are super vulnerable to leaking. Hilo High, Pahoa High, KL.
And maybe we'll look at an alternative, right? Maybe there's an alternative to the
Other
tin
than
roofs.
tapping the
I don't know,
volcano.
right? No. I mean, the roofing material,
Yeah.
Senator, the roofing material.
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
So Keith, you guys, is the Maui person here or?
Yes. Yeah, I bring him up. Jeff Pearson is the Maui administrator, Maui District Office Administrator, which includes.
You can just go ahead and ask your question.
So same question, we get a lot of issues in the Haiku area, the schools and stuff. I guess there seems to be some kind of miscommunication as to who fixes what. I mean, I mean, we know more acid rain, so maybe like start with us first. But you know, I think we'll be easier. But how can you guys help with that communications?
Jeff Pearson, Engineering Program Manager for the Maui District Office. There's a couple of different methods that we can do to repair the schools. A project can be made out and it goes out to bid. As it was already said, we're a little bit short-handed, but if possible, we can have the construction management side of DAGs manage the construction of these projects. That's not always the case because, like I just said, we're short-handed. With respect to Haiku School, there's work right now on the covered walkways and building E. They found the roof was in horrible shape, so there's a change order for almost as much as the project was to repair the roof before they repair the roof. Other cases, the work will be, a lot of work is handled by DOE. They have two different project types where they're larger projects, smaller projects from about $0 to $250,000, and there's larger projects. Those can be handled by DOE, and DOE does have a lot of funds to do these repairs. If they're smaller projects like repair the toilet, paint the door, those kind of things, put up a small piece of fence, then the DAGs personnel can do those things. When it gets larger, then they just started the PSC program with small contractors. We'll do an estimate at DAGs. Well, first of all, we determine if the project is large enough that we can't do it. If it's small enough, then we do it and we just go with the work order. If it gets to a larger extent, then we can have the PSC projects, some of these small contractors. But we'll look at it, determine we can't do the work, provide a estimate, kind of like from out here, not a detailed estimate, and then provide that information to Bowers and Kubota, and then they'll move forward and do those repairs with the programs that they have.
So when you have time, can we do that? Because DOE kicking them back to you guys, and then it's being kicked back the other. Maybe we should sit down, because I mean, some of the principals are like, oh, we need this, this, and this, and then it comes under CIP projects and so forth. So kind of wanting to know what you guys do and what they do, and what would be the money cap of who goes to where. That would be helpful. Thank you. Nice seeing you.
It's one of the few things that's actually working really good is the Bowers and Kubota PSC, you call it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of my principals are telling me they've been very on it, on the campuses, taking assessments, bundling permits together in global permits, especially in the SMA area. So any way we can increase the use of those, that system is really helpful, because there's a lot of good positive feedback from the principals about their work, and especially on the
Bowers and Kubota should get credit. They've set up these systems, then they speed up the process. We don't have to get design funds. You don't have to have plans, and for every you re-roof a portable. After you re-roof one portable, you can re-roof another portable. You don't need design plans and bid out in the whole bit. They have a list of contractors. They go through and they rate them. They pick a contractor. They have contractor bids on the project, and then they're off. Also, Maui County allows Bowers and Kubota and these type of projects to not require all these permits, and it's signed off and it goes through Public Works. Get the letter, Public Works reviews it, signs off, and off they go. So I think on this topic, more credit should be given to DOE than to anybody else, because what did Ricky say? We are bound to fail. They have so much money that is out there to do the repairs, and they don't have enough time to get all the projects.
what's the threshold
done.
for them?
Pardon me?
You said the threshold is 25,000 for them.
Oh, no, it's a lot greater than that. I think the smaller projects can actually go up to 250,000. And then there's another program, the JOC program, which may require design and bid out, but they also have.
One goes up to 250, right?
This is both these projects are under Bowers and Kubota now. The PSC one just started up recently. They just got their contractors in place. They've just kicked off. They have got 2 employees, so they're just starting that one. A month or two.
No, I just wanted to find out from the comptroller, what's going to be the remote work policy?
Thank you, Chair. So, right now, as you know, the departments are operating under the existing policy, which expires in February. Our intent is to reevaluate all of those positions that have been teleworking up until that point in time, to determine which positions make the most sense to keep within our facilities, to remove that teleworking ability, and then to analyze what the new policy looks like and how we can incorporate any kind of teleworking options that might come forward from that. But again, it's a reset essentially.
But what are gonna be, first of all, what are the legitimate reasons to continue remote work?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Oh, if you look at what you presented us,
Mhm.
some of those reasons seem questionable.
Some of the determinations you mean that have been made
Says
to
here,
allow for.
reason for continued remote work. I'm not sure what, one reason is vacant.
Yeah, I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense.
One reason is new position.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit, provides an enhanced work-life balance.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, I mean, the way that I look at telework and the way that I've approached it, prior to
Are
joining
you gonna
DEX.
be calling all of these
Yeah.
back?
Yes, that is our intent. We're gonna do a reset.
There's one here, to accommodate individuals' need for social distancing,
Yeah,
convenient when just as or more efficient. So it's convenience.
mhm. Yeah, so again, the telework policy was in existence prior to me coming on board. What our intent is to allow the current policy to expire in February, which is, right around the corner, and then do a complete reset and an analysis in terms of who should be or who may be allowed to telework.
Enhancement of employee health and safety, facility space optimization. I mean, these are the reasons you guys gave us.
I understand.
Some positions telework 5 days.
Yep.
Says your personal reasons.
We need to do a better job explaining why they're teleworking, to your point, Chair.
There's supposed to be a policy in it, they're high-performing employees. They're going to be working from home. You're going to be giving them assignments, and then you'll have some evaluation that they're doing the work that's supposed to be done
Well,
at
how do
home.
you measure productivity?
How do I measure productivity?
No,
Each
that has to be
manager
part of
who
the
Yes,
policy.
it is. Yeah, it definitely is.
So
In fact, I've
preference is to
asked,
get approvals.
Yes. So Chair, I've asked our administrators that have individuals that are on telework, how are they measuring whether or not those individuals are completing their tasks? And what I've gotten back is that, they constantly monitor their employees. They're in, regular communication with their employees, either via email or via Teams. They provide them assignments. So to your point, Senator, you have high-performing employees. You may have attorneys, you may have, other professionals that are capable of doing work, remotely. And then you judge their success based on whether or not they're meeting the deadlines that are set forth in those assignments. And so
Well, we're
that
talking
is,
about things like the Keawe building, and here you have a
Mhm.
public works manager, 5 days, architect 5 days, engineer 5 days, all teleworking the whole week.
Mhm.
But yet our projects slipping through the cracks.
and to your point, Chair, I mean, exactly like I've described, that telework policy ends in February and we will then reset and reevaluate.
And in fact, if you're DAG, so you have standards in terms of, we've been looking at people in leased buildings. So if in fact you're teleworking, your configuration in the office should also change, and you don't have your own office, you don't have, cubicles that are assigned to individuals. So I think looking at that whole comprehensive view of what is teleworking and what does it impact in terms of space as well as people.
Yeah, but you gotta make sure productivity.
Yeah.
And measurables.
Absolutely. And the administrators are holding their people accountable.
Yeah, but some of these reasons you don't even agree, looks like.
I don't agree with the explanation, but what I do agree with is the way that they're managing their people.
I just told you, all these projects are falling through the cracks. How is that productivity?
Yeah, the Keawe project that you mentioned is a concern, and that's something that will be
And that's
I'll be
just the
taking
ones that
up.
we know about right now.
Yeah.
It's Kona Hospital too, I think, I remember.
I mean, you have pages and pages of people teleworking. Probably more than any other department.
Hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of those teleworking positions are actually within ETS.
Say, how else you can pay 6 guys 235,000?
I don't know. I mean, perhaps, we can talk more about that, but it's definitely something that, is concerning for me as well.
Okay, and then you said, oh, well, it's up to the supervisor, but what about the supervisor? So OIP, who's her supervisor? OIP, executive director, up to 3 days a week. Who checks her productivity? Is it you?
Well, she's an attached agency.
Yeah, so who checks her then? Nobody? There has
Yeah,
to
I
be
mean,
accountability
Yeah,
somewhere.
in terms of
Executive
who she reports to me, right, as an attached agency, but I don't have, direct oversight or management of her. I mean, because she's an attached agency, but it's clear. I mean, when Cheryl and her team, are producing or asked to produce opinions or provide guidance, they're providing opinions and guidance. I mean, I've reached out to Cheryl and her team, in the past, and I've received prompt
Yeah, so
responses.
how do you measure though? You still need some kind of metrics.
I understand.
GVO
Sure.
should start up their task force again and start walking the buildings.
And then what's the difference between, I don't understand. There's at least 3 IT band B position titles. 1 teleworks for 5 days a week and 2 telework 4 days a week. So what would be the difference?
Yeah. And Chair, if I can.
How do you determine, oh, okay, your position, even though it's the same position, is 5 days?
Mhm. If it's okay with you, Chair, perhaps the CIO can explain a little bit more
Oh,
about.
we're gonna handle
teleworking.
the CIO separately.
Okay.
And then you have some secretary 2 positions, 3 days a week. Anyway, this is something that you're really gonna have to look at.
I agree.
Senator
Oh,
Pavel.
only one quick one. So when the whole telling work at home, I remember there was a standard of what was going on for teleworking at home. I mean, I just kind of blown away when I hearing stuff like get to walk through the parking lot, not with you guys, with somebody else, but you get teleworking for 5 days. Everybody else was 3 or 4. I understand you knew and all of this other stuff, but the bottom line is this, who's gonna give the guidelines for your department and how quickly are you gonna revamp this? Because every single one that Senator De La Cruz just talked about, none of them should have been even approved telemarketing. I mean, teleworking, sorry. Telemarketing would have been good to be making money for the state, but anyway, the bottom line is these guys gotta come back. My goodness, some of these guys was doing is having a luau up there, man. I mean, 5 days a week. Shucks. Man.
Yeah.
It's a good, but no, I mean, you don't need to answer. I mean, just, are you gonna come up with a policy that restricts a little bit more? Because when you're saying that they're a manager and because unless they're really on it, I mean, I can go, I mean, I know this because I had stuff like that, right? I would leave and then they'll do everything in one day. But did they really work for 8 hours straight? You can tell me that the supervisors watching over those guys actually work constantly for 8 hours? I can guarantee you not, because my staff wasn't too. I feel like that not everybody's working 8 hours. You know what I mean? They get time for do whatever. So this is a taxpayer's money. That's the reason why I'm very shrewd in what happens in my office upstairs and how certain things are taking place. But man, it sounds like none of these guys had any accountability, and I hope you do better than anybody that was before you. I'm going forward because we're talking about taxpayers' money. It's not their money. It's not your money. It's the taxpayers' money. And if we get people going 5 days, we need to be justified in knowing how are they really being monitored, how we know they're really doing the work. But they can do a whole week's work in 1 day. As long as they show the product at the end of the week. Look, see what I mean? So it's not a constant monitoring. If they did their work, the supervisor's okay, check, I'm all right. You know what I mean? When it comes to taxpayers' money, we gotta do better. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Well, you have quite a bit of executive directors teleworking. I mean, culture and arts, 2 to 5 days a week remote. So if it's the supervisors that's supposed to check everybody else, who checks the supervisor?
Yeah, that's a good point. And as I mentioned, the intent is to do a complete reset once this expires in February.
Well, DBED stopped all telework as of February 1st, and they're gonna reevaluate before they start again.
Yep. And we may end up doing the same thing, Chair.
I just want to check about office space.
Yep.
So how is that program going in evaluating office space, reconfiguring, seeing if we have to rent?
Yeah, so as you know, there's a mandate for us to reduce lease space by 10%, I think by 2026 or something like that. I apologize, I don't know the exact date, but we're continuing to analyze the space that we have to determine what is available so that we can move departments or operations into those spaces so that we can reduce the overall leasing.
Well, if these people are going to work 5 days, they don't need a desk at the office.
Yeah, so you could do things like, I think I heard someone mention.
But I don't think they should be working out 5 days.
Yeah. For me, just personally, I like people in the office. I think it's just easier.
You just gotta
to be able
ensure
to-
productivity.
Yeah,
That's the main thing. You gotta ensure. And if there's no accountability, then we shouldn't allow it.
agreed. And that's, hopefully in the DHERD policy that comes out, soon, which is currently being, I think, discussed by the unions. We'll address some of those things. So as it relates to the reduction in space, we're continuing to look at what we have available. We don't have a lot of available space. We have, I think, something like the total space that we have in the Capital District, we have about 1.1 million square feet of space in the Capital District and about 350,000 square feet of space outside of the Capital District here on Oahu. Of that space, that's like about 1.5 million square feet of space. There's 8,243 square feet of space that's available, that's vacant, that we could potentially move people into. The problem with that is that some of it's not contiguous. You might have an office here, you might have another space there in different locations. And so, trying to fit people into that type of availability is a little bit of a challenge without having to go through, a full on.
Who audits? Because I remember when we took some WAM site visits, and when people retire, the person next to them kapus their space. So then now we have one less space. So I don't know who's auditing that, but we saw that when we went to different divisions and different departments.
Yeah, I mean, it is a big issue for us.
So it's hard to
Audrey.
say, oh, that's not enough space, because when we walk, people are taking way more space than they need.
And there's
a telework.
Yeah, and there's a formula, right, for that to determine how much space they should be having per person.
So that's
based
your
on,
job to ensure all that, though.
Of course, I understand that.
Yeah, the law we passed 209, it requires them to actually act on your assessment. So the comptroller has the authority, because the previous comptroller said he didn't have the authority. So now the law is that you do have the authority to monitor and assess how much space is being used. And the idea was that we would bring back lease space. Lease office space that's in the private sector, so that we would use our buildings for all of our employees.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And also just
put things in archives.
Yeah, no, I was just going to get there, Chair. Thank you.
We saw that when we all from the floor to the ceiling. We should do a show on borders within the state.
Yeah. So Chair, that is
fire hazard.
It is, and that is something that we have mentioned in cabinet meetings I've mentioned that in cabinet meetings that we do have this ability to take files at the archives and to clean out space, to your point, to reduce, possible fire hazards, as well as to open up space within different locations to meet the needs. One of the things that I did want to mention is that, we're with law, like as an example with law enforcement, we're having to find, space specifically for that department, which is going to set us back quite a bit, as it relates to the needs that they have for their operations. But looking at things like, can we move forward with a facility that might be able to, incorporate them, like the Mililani Tech Park, right? That was part of the discussion in the past. I think is a brilliant idea, for us to consider going forward to start to move operations, into state facilities out of lease space. So, and then one last thing I'll mention is that within Public Works Division, there's actually a leasing section. We just recently, I think, brought in a couple of, I think we filled four vacancies, or we're about to fill four. We have so we're filling the vacancies within the leasing division, but that division is going to take on this requirement to go through our current facilities, to do the analysis to determine where's the best place for people to be located so that we can meet.
Because I know you have the new law enforcement agency, you have ADC.
ADC, we just recently approved, I just actually this morning approved their request for additional space in the state office tower. So that was just, I literally approved it before I walked over here this morning.
And what other agencies are out there?
That's all that I know, but and the Attorney General's office, according to Chris. So, yeah.
Okay.
I have a question just on your report, on the lease space. You say that, BSD and Department of Human Services had 22,800 square feet of space. You leased from HHFDC, it's on your report, page 5. And then you said, well, you converted that space, the 22,000 square feet, into an MOA, therefore reducing the amount of lease space. But it's a state building to a state building. So how much lease space do you have that's outside of state-owned buildings? Because I know that, for example, unemployment insurance is saying that they pay for their lease space from the building that they're in the Kealikumoku building. So can we get a more accurate inventory of what is leased space? Because the report says you have 509,000 square feet of leased space, but if some of that is on your own property and all you have to do is convert into an MOA, then it's really kind of deceptive because you're not really moving people out of privately owned lease space into state-owned buildings.
Yeah, and that's the intent, right? Is to get people out of privately owned buildings and onto state facilities.
Right.
So we
So
recognize.
if you can relook at your inventory, this information on converting from lease space to an MOA is not really what we were hoping you would do, is take people out of privately owned space into state buildings.
Well, ideally, you want to look at that and see what makes sense in purchasing buildings to move them over and still have enough space in the building to lease out so that we can create revenue to pay for the maintenance of the building.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, in fact, and again, I don't like to go back to my prior history, but when I was at the county, that was exactly what we're trying to do, was to get our own people out of, lease space and into buildings that we owned, so that we're not just paying somebody else's mortgage. So yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah.
So can you reassess that inventory you gave to us 2 years ago? Because I don't think it's accurate.
Follow up on SFA, because they said that they've been waiting for space.
At SFA, okay.
School Facilities Authority.
Okay. We'll take a look.
That's the reason why they're using not to come in at all to the office, because they have no office.
We'll take a look at that.
Okay. Okay, any other questions in there? Then we can go to the CIO. Okay, so I have just 2 quick questions. So the problem, now that procurement is going to fall under you, how do you reconcile your activities at HTA and the procurement fiasco with now your procurement office is under the comptroller?
So happy to discuss that with you. I will tell you that state procurement office is separate. It is an attached agency, but they board that hires and fires the state procurement, the chief procurement officer. And so there is separation in terms of responsibility.
But the
and oversight.
there still is, I think, on the board.
It's one of 5, but it cannot be the chair of the board.
Yeah, but you should still be advocating that other departments say, hey, be proactive in saying, hey, how come you guys aren't following? You should be calling, because procurement officer from the beginning,
Yeah.
a lot of those problems wouldn't have ever.
So I will tell you that,
Problem.
in my prior role at HTA, I had many conversations with Bonnie and with Kevin over there at SPO about procurement. I will say this, that I think it's extremely important for the state procurement office to have a robust training system in place. I really believe that's important. They do have training in place, but I think there's an opportunity to expand upon that so that we're not just sort of having people attend, classes, videos,
So how
whatnot.
do you take those thoughts
Yep.
and then reflect that in the budget? Because it's one thing to say, hey, I think they should have a training. And
Yeah,
then you walk away and who the hell's supposed to go advocate for the funding for it then?
I don't intend to walk away. I mean, my intent is to help bring up that state procurement office to support them with what they need. And then more importantly, to work with the departments that are interacting with that agency to ensure that they're all properly trained. There was this whole movement to pull procurement staff with procurement responsibilities right into the procurement office. And in fact, they did a study. And so looking at that and how we can, possibly leverage some of those things, I think is going to be important for us with the state procurement office.
So
But I
how
think
is-
there's tremendous
can you
opportunity.
expound on that? Because there was this working group on the consolidation.
Yep.
And also, Bonnie, we gave a position for a legal specialist in procurement as well as a construction specialist in procurement, so that you would have expertise in the SBO to advise and help the department. So can you tell us what's happening with that and update?
I would ask, I'm not sure if if there's a representative. I think the representative from the state procurement office is here. Is Don still here? Maybe Don can come up and speak to that.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. So I'm Dawn Tsuruta Kashiwabara, and I'm the purchasing chief. And so as far as response to the two positions for the legal and the legal counsel and the construction, I guess, subject matter expert. So that was part of the budget request. And so,
But it was it's actually approved last session. So where is it in the recruitment process? There should have been, there was a position description.
Yeah, your budget request is only the 13,500 for past performance database. That's the only AGS 240 I see in there.
yeah, so I guess
So
this
there's
is
no
to the
money
act.
for training, no money for no positions.
Not specifically for training, but for the subject matter experts to come into the office.
We
No.
funded it last
Yeah, that
session.
was last year.
That was last year.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so-
where is it in the recruitment
Is it-
Right, the recruitment,
process?
right, so we are actually needing to create the position descriptions in order to fill.
So there were position descriptions already created during this interim. So where is it in the recruitment process? Where are you recruiting for it? Or
I believe that
is it in BNF?
There
Is
were
it
the
in
two-
your office? Is it HRD helping you? Where is it?
so it's
Two
still within
two
our,
important
right,
positions.
right, so it's within our office, so we're still working on filling the positions. Like the other positions that are vacant.
Can
right?
we get a better update on where? What was that?
So those positions are within our personnel office right now and going through the establishment process. So, so that we can begin the actual recruitment process once
Okay,
once
you
that's
can see
done.
why it's so hard to add positions.
I
How
understand.
long it takes.
Yeah.
So the
So-
legal position, is that your request for
No, it was funded.
It was
last
already
year.
funded
from the
last.
last year? But I guess she said that it was limited and they wouldn't be able to do the kind of work that she needed. She needs somebody to be on loan from the AG's office.
Mhm.
No, she could still do
Yeah,
both.
she can do it. It's just as long as they just don't go to court.
Yeah,
That
but
was
she
the
was
whole
hoping to
thing
get
with the
somebody to go to
ages.
court.
No, so she can have the legal
But the
specialist
legal
and someone to help her.
Okay, she may come in asking for someone to help her part.
Yeah.
The age from the AG's.
AG's office, yeah. So maybe you could work with the AG on that, see if they'd be supportive of dedicating a position to her.
We can do that. Thank you, Chair.
But we need those two positions. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to actually be the experts helping the departments, that was critical in terms of knowing the law and especially the not only in procurement across federal, state and local, but also the construction expertise so that it would offload from DAG's own public works people to actual procurement across the state.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to find out was, so when you were the CFO, there was a gag order on the HTA board to not make public any statements that were that contradicted the majority of the board's vote.
No, there was no gag order.
Okay,
What happened was, and I'll just walk you through this.
because the
So-
meeting right before this,
That was an
Yes, there was a-
that was an inaccurate statement. I will tell you it was an inaccurate statement because there was a policy that the board had asked us to take a look at, multiple policies to modernize them, right? And so what happened was we did research on, you know, what sort of our best practices out there with boards and commissions, compiled that and provided that to the board for their consideration, and it went nowhere. It actually was not approved by the board. It died in committee, and that was the end of that. And that essentially was to address any, not to prohibit discussion, but it was to try to have cohesion beyond discussion. And so, but that actually was completely, there is no gag order. What may have been confused is that there wasn't a non-disclosure agreement or a what do you call that? Not non-compete. Anyways, if there's like, you know, a conflict of interest amongst people that participated in the evaluation committee for, you know, for the RP, and that's standard practice and policy, right? To have those types of agreements in place. That was the only thing that was done, and that was done in accordance with what we understood as procurement practice. So,
Okay, so if you, now that you're the comptroller
Yep.
and OIP is administratively attached to you,
Yep.
I still think the comptroller should be advocating the position for their entire department.
yep.
And so that's where I just want to make sure there's not going to be a conflict in thought.
I have never, and I would not agree to encouraging or have any kind of a gag order in
So
place.
maybe if yourself, the OIP director can meet with HTA and discuss
Yep. That's my
the
intent.
discussion.
That's my intent based on what we heard this afternoon. Yes.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
discuss what the discussion, I guess, review the discussion we had in the earlier
Yeah.
meeting.
And thank you for the opportunity to share and let you know what actually was the truth behind that.
Okay, any other questions?
Just one more of SPO since we're on that. There's this past performance database, and that's a big project. I see it's important because, you know, we have vendors or consultants that, you know, do a poor job and they keep on coming back and it comes from one department, another department doesn't know that it's a bad contractor, they hire the contractor. So that past performance database was really important to execute. I see it's still in the works. Where is it? And then could we have a status update on that?
Sure.
We did put a budget together and we approved the budget for that.
Yes. So actually currently, we're in the testing phase of the database. And we actually have a deadline to complete that testing by the end of this month. So we're
So
getting.
when is it going to be up and running and you're going to do
I
training of
don't-
the departments or what's
Absolutely
happening?
right, yeah. So once it's ready to go, but we're still testing, we're in the testing phase to just make sure that everything will work. As
What's
we
the
have
timeline on
planned.
that?
I don't have the exact timeline though.
Could we have that in the report
We can
back?
get
to
back
us?
to you on that. Yes, thank you.
It's really an important project.
Absolutely. We were waiting for it too, because it will be part of the evaluation process. You know, in bids, not only
RFPs, but competitive sealed bids too.
Thank you.
Professional services too, actually. Thank you.
Okay, but I have just one last question before we go over to CIO. On your vacancy chart, you have a janitor two that had an 89-day hire 6 times. Why not just hire the person?
It's a great question. Do you have an answer? If not, we'll get
That
back to
seems
you.
so awkward.
Yeah, I agree. We'll take a look at that.
Okay, get
Sure.
back to us. It doesn't seem like you guys
They
are
were
familiar,
fired.
but it's in your, it's in your guys' chart.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Senator Milwaukee has questions for the CIO.
Hi, Doug. You know that we've been looking at the consolidation of IT and similar to SBO, really looking at some expertise and getting good staff so that they can help all the departments, especially with the legacy systems, UI, DCD, DOTAX. So, and you've been working with the working group now, and I see that you're working with IT, but do the directors get involved so that we really look at what can be consolidated? You have a good report, but these are things we're going to do. Where are you on getting close to a plan and a budget? And is December 2023 sufficient time for you to do that for us?
Yes, Senator, thank you. I do think that's sufficient time. You know, we've just changed over pretty much all of the directors. So we were consulting with the last set of directors. We're letting the current set of directors settle in a little bit and get through these processes, and then we'll have those discussions with them. And in some cases, we have, already started to talk. And some people, like Ann, is not director of labor anymore, but she's gone back to the unemployment insurance program. So we have discussions with them.
So do you have something more specific than the report that you sent to us in terms of where the departments are and kind of a flow chart of, which departments and what are they willing to give up, so to speak? It's simple with cybersecurity because none of them can do that. But, when you get to the other levels, can you give us some kind of more specific report than this is what we plan to do, which is in your...
I think that's hard to do yet because there's a lot of thinking that the IT staff and the directors will have to do about how we all work together. And it may be in some cases, we'll take over more from an ETS perspective. Like some departments might be happy to have us take over their business application, like maybe unemployment insurance.
Yeah, but it's not about making people, you got to do what's right for the state. I mean, people might have their individual preferences.
Right. Yes, Senator. I agree, but in some cases, they have very large budgets and federal money and large staffs, and it may be better for the state for somebody like Colea or Medicaid to continue to keep that within DHS rather than try and move it into ETS.
Okay, but I think if she's talking about it I think there's always going to be a few exceptions because that's how it goes. But in general thought, we should be centralizing some of these services. The problem with COVID was that we couldn't get IT people from different departments to go and help HTA and labor. Versus if you have it how the attorney general set up where they're assigned to people, when they got to pull back an attorney to go help another division, they can do it.
We did have a lot of people helping those other departments all through the pandemic.
Yeah,
so
but it took a while. I mean, we were on the COVID committee. It was not easy. And
when they set up their big setup in the convention center.
Yeah, that wasn't at the beginning of COVID though, when we were trying to get this thing ramped up.
Right, but almost everybody from ETS was in there helping set those things up. And we have a regular standing staff of people that work on the unemployment insurance application already in ETS. But all the shared services like networking and cybersecurity, those things should be easy to transfer in to one, big agency.
Yeah.
And
I mean, even like we see different RFPs for management of cloud. Why isn't there just one?
Right. There could be. Right now, it tends to be what they're sitting on already. So if they have a Microsoft application, like health tends to use Microsoft a lot, they tend to go to the Microsoft cloud. If they have Oracle applications like DHS, they tend to go to the Oracle cloud. But it will take time and money to transfer those applications. It tends to be that if you're going to have an Oracle application, you don't want necessarily sitting on a Microsoft cloud because that's extra work. So there will be a transition.
Yeah, as
period to
long
do
as
those
the
things.
deviation can be justified.
Right.
But I think there's too many examples where the opposite needs to occur.
We agree, and you know, like buying file servers in the office, that shouldn't happen anymore. They should be moving their files to the cloud. And so when those things come to us for approval, we decline them and we ask them to move to the cloud and we give them help with that. So we are trying to move everybody along. There's still a lot of legacy IT in the state that we have to work with, and so we can't always move as fast as we'd like. But I agree with you, you know, we'll make a lot of progress.
Okay, so
Well, so we looked at, you know, the idea of what the chair said about the Attorney General's office, where you do have a real expert group that constantly is being trained. So I don't know about the AG's office, but you know, so the intent is constantly being trained so that you've got the experts, and then you've got the subject matter expertise that they can be
delegated,
assigned to
assigned.
departments. But at least you start getting a cadre of people that really have expertise and not losing them because we don't pay them or they don't know, they're not happy here in the state. They go to other places and we lose talent. So what is it that we can keep the workforce, attract and keep the workforce, and help the departments get out of legacy systems?
Well, to be honest, attracting IT workforce and attracting them is one thing and keeping them is another.
Mm-hmm.
I think our young people today that are working in IT are going to be mobile.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they might work for the state for a while, then they might go work for the bank for a while, and then they'll go work for Microsoft or Adobe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're seeing. I expect people will move around.
Until they're like, oh my God, I need a pension.
Right.
Come back.
And we do that. We talk to them about that, and we're going to, you know, continue to, I mean, I have people that have gone out and I asked them to come back. You know, so it's a constant work, but there's going to be a lot of churn in IT because there's so much opportunity. Right now, there's a lot of layoffs in IT, so maybe we'll catch some people that way. People will come back. So, you know, in the real world, I just think there'll be churn.
So, you know, there's a lot of old systems, even business operations. So you've got that modernization team, but it's a small group. Right. So how are they helping the departments? Because garbage in, garbage out. So how do you help the departments modernize their operations and then the IT follows? Are you doing that, or is that up to the department, or it just happens if it happens?
We have a governance process and we have an IT system called LeanIX, and we keep track of everything every department is doing. And in that system, I know all their systems. I know what software it's built on. I know how old it is. I know when it needs to be replaced. And we help guide them through that process. And we'll be starting to do that with the new directors now that they're in with their IT folks. So we have a roadmap for every department.
So is that accessible to other people, or is just your own personal matrix?
There is a public version of it that's on the ETS website. So you can go on there and see all the programs and all the projects by department. There is information in our database that we can't make public because it would just cause security and other problems.
Okay.
But
so based on Senator Moriwaki's question, I think the committee might find it difficult to support on table 4 the transfer of recurring IT costs to DOTAX and DHERD. I think it's better that it does stay in the CIO so that we can get a hold of this, because it's almost counter to Act 248 and Act 179. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I saw you have 6 positions for cybersecurity in your request. Are these additions to existing positions, or are these 6 brand new positions you're looking for?
these were positions that were added in last year's budget. And so we're asking for full year funding this year.
For 200 and something, how much, 235,000? I just find it very, I don't think you're going to attract anybody to do cybersecurity at that kind of salary split among 6 people, FTEs. Pen test plus certification, you can pretty much go out in the private market and get 145,000 easy. So I just would hate to see that you have these positions vacant because they're just not going to compete in any way with the the real world, so to speak. And then with this cybersecurity, would this be a blue team integrated into your existing IT structure? Or are you looking to perhaps emulate what's being done elsewhere to have a multi-agency red team with these 6 positions?
I would say there would be a blue team and not a red team because we have others come in and do the red team work. For example, on our elections, we have Department of Homeland Security come in and test
you
our
have-
election system.
So yeah, a lot of states have had challenges with Homeland Security doing red team work. I'll pull out North Dakota, for example. Right there, they actually got dedicated red team positions within their IT. They stood up a cybersecurity division. So pen test and also do a vulnerability assessment to migrate all state agencies and sister governments towards a better vulnerability score. I mean, what is Hawaii's vulnerability score right now? I mean, compared to other states?
I don't know that we have a vulnerability score. You know, we do work with Homeland Security and MSISAC and some
I
other
would
agencies.
really stress that that is something that's baseline cybersecurity right there. North Dakota moved all the way up to 3.7. We're considering the exposure we have from nation state actors and the ability to pivot throughout different levels of state government. You know, I'm hoping that can look at what they're doing. There'll probably be a couple bills this year on that. Hopefully we can work with you on it. But cyber insurance was brought up in the risk assurance assessment, and their experience has been they were able actually to lower their cyber security, their cyber insurance, because they stood up this red team, if you will, within your division. So, I mean, this is something that we can do to be proactive, because if we know what attackers will do, and we can better prepare our defenses, perimeter defenses and internal defense, especially with legacy systems, it'll make us more better to, you know, anticipate a potential breach. I mean, you're talking about a lot of personal identifiable information, especially in like DLIR and others, that if it were to be a target of a successful breach could cause a lot of damage to the state. So, and then one other thing, you had a migration of 13 positions for a migration to the cloud accounting software in there as well. If we're migrating to the cloud for the accounting software, why would we need the 13 FTE? Wouldn't the vendor be responsible for that migration and the operation of the cloud software system?
During deployment of when we're doing design, development, implementation of a system, we find that we have to match the developers team almost 1-for-1 so that they can work together. And so usually we have, our business analysts in that team. We have our program managers in that team. We have technical analysts on that team.
But why would it need to be permanent? I guess once that migration is done, wouldn't they then take over those things insofar as the vendor goes?
They would.
Okay, so this wouldn't be this would just be to get this transition done and 13 positions.
Right, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, thanks. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And I'd love to have a discussion with you and with Vince Huang, our cybersecurity
Yeah,
chief.
I would definitely like to do it.
And we can talk about the red team idea. And we're familiar with North Dakota because I know they have done some leading edge things in cyber. So
well, yeah, and they've found it the hard way.
Yeah.
And so it's a way for us, again, to cyber insurance to not only better prepare defenses, better prepare migrations, but also a way to lower cost potentially. So yeah, I'd love to continue that with you, but thank you, Chair, for allowing me that. But
well, on table 11, page 63 of 68 on your document, and I guess it's page 52 on ours. Almost that whole page are vacancies for under your shop.
We
But
do
you're
have
still asking for more positions, even though you have this whole page full of.
Well, we're mostly asking for having those positions that were granted last year, funded in this year. So,
and they're all hired.
They're not all hired. Some of them haven't even been established yet. We're still going through the paperwork, to reorganize and establish.
So maybe when that's
positions.
complete, then we can look at doing that. But
right, but they're in different areas than where we need these people. So
are these vacancies, are these positions in your vacancy chart still needed then?
they are. A lot of them are legacy positions where we're having to still support mainframe operations and things that are, maybe not as desirable as, more modern positions like cybersecurity or networking. But we have a lot of open positions still that we need to fill, and some of that is recovering from the pandemic.
Okay, and then I see two positions here. You went 5 times 89-day hire. Why
We
not
have,
just fill the position?
we have a couple of employees that are, we're government employees that are retired now, and they come in and do 89-day positions for us to help us fill in when we can't find somebody to fill a position.
Okay,
But they, for example, a prior network manager for the state who knows all of the ins and outs of the network, we continue to rely on him.
okay. Can you please give him the chart from community colleges on the 8? So community colleges is they're supposed to start a program. I think we had talked to you about already. 4 of those types of jobs need bachelor's, 4 only need CTE certificate. So if we can work with the community colleges and creating a pipeline for at least the ones that don't need the bachelor's.
That would be
right away,
outstanding. Yeah.
then we can work with the high schools and community college.
And where we have exempt positions, they don't require community college, or they don't require a bachelor's degree.
So we can give you what community colleges is supposed to stand up soon on IT.
Right.
Senator
It is,
Wakai?
yeah.
No, go ahead.
It is a requirement for our legacy kind of civil service positions that they have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why they want to move up to a different type of structure.
That would be great.
Doug, I enjoyed working with your team in pulling back DLNR's state park reservation system. At one time, it was just a convoluted mess, 3 different websites prone to cybersecurity breaches. And your team pulled it back and put it under one website, and it's far superior today than it was earlier this year or earlier last year. One point of disappointment, though, was that they pulled it back and they gave it to your state contract, NC, I can't remember, and what's the name of that?
It's a NIC Hawaii.
NIC Hawaii. Because from a policy standpoint, we're trying to invest in our young people, invest in local companies, and there were a lot of local technology companies that could have built out the state park reservation system. But I was told that it's just kind of easier for ETS to go with NIC because they're one of your biggest contractors there. But part of me thinks that, the larger and larger you make NIC with more and more of your state contracts, the harder it is for us to get local contractors and local companies to start taking part in the growth of technology in the state government. So is there any way that we can somehow have a local contractor do the park reservation system? Because eventually, when we look at tourism, we want to put it on a statewide tourism platform, right? Have the health stuff. We're talking about digitizing the ag form. All of these things should be part and parcel to the entire visitor experience. And I really don't want to see NIC build out this whole thing. I really want to see a Paxil, a Data House, or some other local company be doing this. But you've chosen to go back to what you know, which is NIC.
Well, we can have a longer discussion on that probably, but NIC Hawaii is a local company.
They're not based here.
They aren't based here, but they have a local presence, and they're part of the Access Hawaii Committee, which is
just because you have a presence here, that doesn't make you local.
Well, I mean, they're part of a statutory process, which is the Access Hawaii Committee, which is to develop all these little applications for various departments. And there's 150 applications that they help manage, all of which with, one user ID, you can get into 150 applications, and they have a constantly operating help desk that takes both email and phone calls. So, one thing we see a lot of times is these little applications get built and they don't have a help desk, and they don't have an identity management system, and they don't have security. So this is a way for us to know that these things are getting wrapped around these small applications that are being built. But we're always open to, we have lots of contracts with Paxa and Data House and many other companies, eWorld. So we do have a lot of contracts with a lot of different companies in town. NIC Hawaii is one of them. And they have an annual report that they put out every year and provide to the legislature. So I recommend you look at the Access Hawaii annual report so you can see what they do. But it is kind of the go-to for small applications that need user identity and help desk features built into them.
Okay, well, I know that the DLNR has 7 more parks that they plan to put onto their reservation system. I would highly encourage you to see if there's local capacity to be building this out instead of making, the larger and larger we make NIC, the more and more difficult it is for us in the future to start teasing out some of the areas that they have ownership of and help, spawn local technologists and
Mhm.
technology companies. So
Right.
look at that. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I do just a couple, going back to the chair's question about that 5-time 89-day hire, I see that it's a contracts and procurement specialist. So if in fact you're helping the departments contract out for services, you would want somebody with expertise. So why not make that a permanent position that would be available to help?
They have a permanent position. They're choosing not to fill it.
Yeah, so
89-day hire instead.
so why can't you hire the person full-time?
It depends the skill set of, sometimes the skill set of the person that we have as an 89-day hire is hard to duplicate.
Okay, well, look for somebody permanently that has expertise to help the departments. I think that would help a lot. The other is the chief data officer. We gave that position last session because it was important as you look across departments, what you look at data and how you can organize, and it's the governance issue. Where is that in terms of your recruitment?
We're still in the process of establishing that position. I
So
think, right?
where is it stuck?
It has to go, it went through the governor's office, and because of the wording of the letter, it was declined. And so now it's got to go through the governor's office again.
Okay, could you speed up that process and see if we could get that? Because that was very important in terms
Yeah.
of how you organize the department.
What was the
Keith-
lettering?
Yeah, Keith and I and Lewis talked about this last week.
What was the wording that was?
We didn't, we asked to fill the position, and the letter had to say establish and fill the position. So it was a technicality that shouldn't have stopped the process, but it did.
So talking about the governor, your plan was under the previous administration. Is that plan still going to continue, or are there changes to where you're going with what was discussed last session?
In terms of consolidation or
Consolidation, your plan for executing on even the data center and all of the issues that we've been discussing and having plans for.
yeah, to be honest, I haven't had a long sit down with Governor Green yet to go through everything, but we'll do that soon.
But the intent is to
I think things will stay the course, or they would have not brought me back.
okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, no further questions. Adjourn. Thank you. Okay, but we convene in 15 minutes for DOT.